being conducted remotely, consistent with Governor Baker's executive order of March 12, 2020, and the current state of emergency in the Commonwealth due to the outbreak of the COVID-19 virus. In order to mitigate the transmission of the virus, we have been advised and directed by the Commonwealth to suspend public gatherings, and as such, the Governor's order suspends the requirement of the open meeting law to have all meetings in a publicly accessible physical location. Further, all members of public bodies are allowed and encouraged to participate remotely. I hereby call to order the, what date it is? The July 1st meeting of the Triton Regional School Committee at 7 p.m. I am Narissa Wallen, Chair of the Triton Regional School Committee, and I would like to confirm that all members and persons anticipated on the agenda are present and can hear me. Members, when I call your name, please respond in the affirmative. Erin?
I'm here and I can hear you.
Thank you. Paul Goldner?
I'm here and I can hear you.
Maureen?
I'm here and I can hear you.
Caitlin?
I'm here and I can hear you.
Paulise? Pretty sure I saw him.
Is there?
Oh, now.
Oh.
I'm here and I can hear you. Sorry.
Thank you, Paul. Linda? Hear you. Paul Mayette?
I'm here and I can hear you.
Tina?
I'm here and I can hear you.
Wonderful. Thank you all. And staff, when I call your name, please respond in the affirmative. Brian Forget?
I'm here and I can hear you.
Kyle Warren?
I'm here and I can hear you.
Kim Croto?
I'm here and I can hear you.
David McGee?
I am here and I can hear you.
I'm just going to scan real quick. Kaylee Abbott Bishop, our student rep, had said she was joining us tonight, but I don't see her yet. So hopefully she'll be joining us soon. For this meeting, the Triton School Committee is convening remotely via Zoom using the information posted on the district's website identifying how the public may join. If you are personally attending by video conference using your device's camera, please be aware that others may be able to see you. Committee members and administrators, please remember to mute your phone or computer when you are not speaking. All supporting materials that have been provided to members of this body are available on the district's website with the agenda posting unless otherwise noted. The public is encouraged to follow along using the posted agenda. Each vote taken in this meeting will be conducted by a roll call vote. Please note that this meeting is being recorded and that anything that you broadcast may be captured by the recording. Okay. And now I will read aloud our vision statement. We are a community of learners known for our unwavering commitment to meeting the needs of all students. Through the adoption of best practices and our active partnership with families in the wider community who are united in supporting the development of engaged, successful, responsible, resilient learners, students will be well prepared to be ethical, empathetic, and contributing citizens. All right, I have no chairperson's remarks tonight because we're going to get right into the meat of this agenda because I anticipate there being a lot of discussion. So I am going to read aloud the public comment guidelines. This was the oral communications from the public section of the agenda. The next item on the agenda is public comment. Members of the public, the meeting host muted you as you entered the meeting. If you would like to address the committee, please indicate now that you would like to do so, either by raising your hand on your video call, using the raise hand option on the participant screen, or using the chat option. The meeting host will unmute you so that you can address the committee. Please refer to the public comment policy language on the agenda when making your comments, and remember to speak clearly and in a way that helps generate accurate minutes. When you have finished speaking, the meeting host will mute you again. Kaylee is here. Excellent.
Kaylee, yes. Kaylee joined us.
Sorry, Erin, just let me know. Excellent. Welcome, Kaylee. I'm just going to I'm assuming, can you just unmute so we can make sure we can hear you, please? Perfect, thank you. All right, so looking through.
I don't see.
Not see any raised hands.
I see 3 members of the public, Michelle, Chris, and ELG. So if anyone, is anyone raising their hands? No? No? All right.
All right, moving along. The next item on the agenda is the fiscal year 21 September opening and budget implications. So as you're all well aware by now, I'm sure, the opening guidance from the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education came out earlier this week. And what we're going to do is, in your packet, there was a PowerPoint presentation. That was actually from the Department of Elementary and Secondary Ed. Brian's going to go through that quickly, and then Kim's going to talk about what the work that the reopening committee has been doing, and then we'll open discussions from there. So I'm going to turn it over to Brian.
Thank you. So I'm going to keep this brief, as will Kim, because I'm guessing the meat is going to be in the questions that you all have, as I assume there are many opinions and many questions, and so both statements and questions that you would all like to make. So I'm going to go on the assumption that you have the full. There was a letter from the American Academy of Pediatrics. Is Dr. Lloyd Fisher, who was actually the president-elect of the Mass Academy of Pediatrics. There was a letter that he wrote, co-signed with Elizabeth Goodman also, with the American Academy of Pediatrics. That was distributed by the Department of Education. The full, is it 20, 25, 26 page guidance document that was distributed by the Department of Education, as well as a PowerPoint that has, there are 10 slides. So I'm going to make the assumption that folks have read the documentation. We're not going to go through that in detail. And I think the PowerPoint, I'm not going to go through every slide specifically, but I think the slides walk us through kind of the high points of this plan and what we are expecting come fall. So the first thing to note is that it has been reiterated time and time again that the title of this document is Initial Fall Reopening Guidance. Frustrating because we were hoping we were going to get guidance, not initial guidance, late June. We're now expecting final guidance. The projection is mid to late July. And there's still quite a bit, as I'll go over, there's still quite a bit that we're expecting to be clarified in that final guidance that is not clarified in this guidance. So on that first slide, it speaks to the community engagement or the stakeholder engagement. This document in this process was a collective process. There was a reopening working group that was very large with key stakeholders from across the entire state. And I know there's certainly opinions. I have opinions on the way that process worked, having spoken with some folks who were on that. But I think there is definitely a varied level of opinion in regards to how collaborative that process was. But this is born out of guidance from medical experts, from industry stakeholders, educators, and so it was a collaborative effort. We'll leave it at that. The plan outlines the key goal, and it's the fifth slide. There are 4 aspects. It says our goal is the safe return of as many students as possible to in-person school settings. That is the primary, we'll call it guidance. It was clear early on that was a directive from the state, that the goal that we need to prioritize is doing whatever we can to bring all students back into the schools and doing whatever we can. So we are required under this plan to under this guidance, to develop a plan that accommodates 3 scenarios. A full return with accommodations, obviously, and modifications and safety precautions. A fully remote scenario, and then an in-between. It was early on, there was some discussion about this being an a la carte menu that we could choose. It was then made very clear that this is not an a la carte menu, that this is absolutely our priority, is that we're planning for the return of all students. If we can't do that, then we would be able to move to a hybrid model. And if we can't do that, then we would move to a fully remote model. It was made clear that the Department of Ed has teams ready and at the standby, that if we say we are not able to open schools, as a general rule for all students, there's always going to be caveats, but as a general rule, opening schools for all students, that there would be a team visiting us from the Department of Ed to make sure that they agree with our assessment that we can't open schools. Since then, some of you may have seen, not picking on Lexington, but Lexington issued their back to school blueprint last night, and it steers quite clear of that guidance and actually says there will be two options. A full return is not in the books. And so the two options will be a hybrid model, a day on, a day of remote and then a day of in school, or a week of remote and then a week in school, back and forth, or fully remote. So there is still a lot of question. I can say for me, for others that are involved in this process, there are as many questions, if not more, after the release of this documentation and this guidance than there were prior to it. One thing that did become clear is that, again, I'm not following the slides well, but one thing was made very clear in that all of the guidance that I'm sure everyone around this Zoom room here has been following is the assumption of a 6-foot social distancing. When you can't maintain 6-foot social distancing, we have to wear masks. This plan, again, supported by the American Academy of Pediatrics. I know that nationally now the organization has come out to support a return to school for all students. But the window, or I should say the perimeter, is now 3 feet. Ideally, we can get everyone at a 6-foot buffer or distance, but the minimum is 3 feet. So our primary charge was to test that and see what we can do to bring all students back if we were to maintain a 3-foot social distancing requirement. So we're literally in the process of called pressure testing that concept of what we can do. 3-foot distance changes things drastically in regards to passage in hallways. Students can pass in 2 directions if they're hugging the walls on either side and still maintain 3 feet. So the big question is open spaces and in classrooms. So that process is ongoing, but we certainly know we're not going to be able to do things like have gym class in a gym or have lunch in the cafeteria. We know anything that aerosolizes when we project, singing, acting, going to gym class and working up a sweat and breathing hard, none of those activities would be allowed. So I'll have Kim kind of talk quickly through after I'm done here about what the reopening working group, how we're tackling it in that regard. But the charge again was to say, what can we do bringing everyone back with that 3-foot buffer? And then it would be a logical progression from there. Again, that was the assumption as of Monday. As of yesterday, we already have districts that are bucking that trend. So we're going to have to wait and see. Again, this is all born on or is making the assumption that this is data. The data that they're building these assumptions on is largely from different countries that were ahead of us in the progression of the virus and then tried to reopen. And I'm sure we'll get into this, but if you dig into the data, I know Marissa has, you find that maybe it doesn't tell you the same story. I might see a different story than what they're painting as far as a picture and a story here. But by and large, it's assuming that we are relying on this data. We are, one of the things that was made clear is this is not any one measure. It's not just 3 foot of distance between students. It's not just masks. It's not just hand washing. It's not just basic hygiene. It's the combination of all of them that makes this safe. So it is important to note that this requires all students grade 2 through 12 to wear a mask all day, every day, except for breaks. Pre-K to 1, it is highly suggested, and this requires that all faculty and staff are wearing masks all day. Someone asked the question about how we manage those breaks, and there's still no guidance on that. So the one thing I do want to note, on page 8, it does talk about the progression. And again, it lists in-person learning with new safety measures as number 1. So that's been clarified that this is a chronological offering, if you will, not an a la carte menu. Again, we'll have to have that clarified a little more. So we expect full guidance by the end of July. And we are required to provide a plan to the Department of Ed, as I said, that outlines a back to school with restrictions, a remote, fully remote, and a hybrid model. So that is the work that the working group is doing. On the back page, the one thing I want to point out here is This is the kind of around the center there where it says comprehensive guidance coming in July. If you look around all the items on this back page, key policies including academic calendar considerations, facilities and operations, transportation, special program and populations, remote learning resources. This is all information that's coming in the final guidance. All of these indicators are required before we can make any decisions. So any district that is putting guidance out now, putting any type of blueprint or model out now, personal opinion, that's unfair. Because what I know, and I've had so many conversations with parents, what I know is parents need to start planning for whatever the process and whatever the plan and whatever the model will be. Families need to know so they can plan. Does it require changes to childcare? Does it require changes to their job? And what we were hoping for is some definitive guidance late June, early July that we'd be able to take and run with. But we're now not expecting that final guidance until late in July. Which means that we can't give anything definitive. I take that back. We could give something that we say is definitive, but we would have to put lots of caveats on it. And my personal opinion is that doesn't do anything to help families because it will create chaos if we make assumptions and then those assumptions change in 2-3 weeks' time. So I'll leave it at that. I'm going to pass it to Kim before we ask any questions, because I think between my thoughts and Kim's thoughts, some questions may be answered and it will probably generate hundreds more. So I'll pass it over to Kim, who's going to give you an update on, kind of give you an overview of what the working group is, who it's comprised of, and what they've been doing already 2 meetings in.
Thanks, Brian. So as Brian said, we got that draft letter from the state outlining all of the expectations moving forward and what we were charged to do. So we pulled together working groups, and the working groups were based on the different areas that we have to manage and develop in order to open the schools successfully, and that includes all different fronts. So the working groups consist of a teaching and learning group, a student support group, which is really about the social and emotional health, because when these kids come back, we are fully aware that their kids are going to have a lot of anxiety around this whole situation that we want to make sure we address first and foremost after their safety. Excuse me. There is a group that is especially focused on special ed population, EL, and our economically disadvantaged. Again, in addition to the COVID situation, certain things have come to light about equal access, and we wanted to make sure our school and our students have equal access, regardless of which group we're talking about. So that's another thing that we're looking to improve upon as we're working through this process. The other groups that we have is personnel and staffing, just knowing that what do we do with teachers and staff who have some compromised health issues. So that has to be addressed with. We also have a group for facilities and operations, and it's that group that's taking on the 3 feet separation and what does that look like, and drawing diagrams. We have transportation group, and then last we've kind of added a subgroup of technology to find out what professional training needs to happen, what type of devices, hotspots, all of that. So we feel that with the range of questions that we have, we certainly have a subgroup that will be able to unpack those questions and address them appropriately based on the expertise of those people that are part of that group. With that said, we also needed to make sure that we had a diverse group. We couldn't just do this in isolation. So within that teaching and learning group, and that's the largest, there are over 50 individuals, but it's a nice range of people. We have parents, we have teachers, we have students, administration, IAs, trying to think who else we have. Teachers, parents, administrators, teachers. Yeah, I think that's it. So, so again, it's a really great group, a lot of different viewpoints, and a lot of great discussions. So we had our 3rd meeting today. All of our meetings are mapped out with a specific goal. Everything that's laid out in the plan, you'll see on our kind of schedule of what needs to be accomplished and when. The first meeting, we just kind of debriefed on what we all went through and what happened and what did we learn from this experience. The second one, we decided we needed really to first get a sense of what does this do to students' social and emotional wellness. What will we expect? Because if we just do that as an afterthought, it's not going to be integrated into everything that we do. And then today we actually started to work on developing the first plan, which is bringing students back in person. So with that in mind, as we go through this process, we are going to be creating 3 different specific plans. Our goal is to create a plan that has curriculum, resources, and instruction that can easily be transitioned into either a remote setting or a hybrid setting, so that students, parents, teachers are not having to toggle back and forth between 2 different curriculums and platforms and other things that were difficult during the quick shutdown of schools. So with that in mind, today just some of the questions that they broke out into subgroups to talk about. They talked about specifically and first and foremost, what are the social and emotional needs of these students and what support is needed, as well as staff. What are the academic challenges are going to be, what type of additional planning or collaboration time. We certainly know that there's going to be some professional development for not just the teachers, but for the parents and the students. We talked about common platforms, resources, assessment tools. So I really feel, like I said, we made great progress today, and there were, like Brian said, as you start working through and talking through these discussions, you realize there are so many questions, but we truly right now are trying to stay laser focused on creating these 3 plans. We know our priority is first and foremost that social and emotional piece, and then we will be ready to go, I think, hopefully by it's the beginning of August, with 3 plans that are separate but have a lot of common elements, so it'll be an easy transition for everybody. And the last thing I want to say is that we have already sent out 1 survey to parents, which was basically to tell us about your experience. Again, challenges, what do you need if this were to happen again? So we got a lot of good information. We also surveyed the middle school and high school students. So we're using that information to help make some plans that improve upon the situation. So I feel good about that, that it's not just us sitting around making some decisions without any other information to go by. So that's where we are now. And like I said, we certainly have a far way to go, but I feel like we have a good map, at least in some respect, just with the people that we have and the structure that we have placed it in.
And I just want to say kudos to Kim for organizing this, and also a thank you, because this is how many? This is 16, 17, 18 people here today. And none of the 50 folks around that table have any more answers. So the natural propensity is to just go right to, oh my gosh, we need to, how do we, what can we? So this is an exercise in pacing and organization and keeping the focus on identifying the challenges, and so we can methodically answer the questions and find resolutions to the issue. So thank you to Kim for leading the charge on this. So questions. Oh, I'm sorry.
I'll open up for questions. I just want to also say ahead of time, we're not expecting all the answers tonight. I fully anticipate, I know the superintendents are having calls with DESE. There's going to be chances for additional questions. Obviously, there's additional discussions internal to the district as well. So some of these questions may literally just be yep, we acknowledge that that's a question. We're either figuring it out or trying to get answers, and we'll get back to you when we can. So that said, I see Maureen with her hand up, so I'll turn it over to you, Maureen.
All right, thanks, Marissa. And maybe this is a good first question, but whichever plan we end up going with, has there been any discussion about delaying the opening of school to allow for proper training? Because no matter which plan we go with, I'm assuming it's going to require a lot more training than we anticipate. And also teachers, I mean, they tend to come back for a day or two before the students enter the building. So I'm just worried about the amount of training.
A valid worry. So I said to Narissa today, it's really hard to be the guy who's supposed to be in charge with all the answers and literally have no more answers than any of you have right now. So there's been lots of conversations, lots of questions. Again, weekly, sometimes 2 times a week calls with the commissioner. So there's again, all of those details on that 10th slide that really need to be answered. One of them is the top left says key policies, including academic calendar considerations. So there has been lots of discussion about the time on learning requirements, which is at the high school level 990 hours. That is mirrored or combined with the 180-day requirement. So most states, many states have just an hour requirement. Massachusetts lays on a minimum number of days that we have to go to school as well. So I thought it was top secret, but it's in the Lexington plan, so I can say it now. So there is a proposal, and my understanding is it's gaining some considerable traction. Actually, it was also discussed with the Board of Education, who gave the commissioner, Jeffrey Riley, who's the Commissioner of Education, they gave him autonomy to make the choice when they met yesterday for their the Board of Education meeting, to reduce it down to 177 days. Our teacher work year is 183 days, 184 for new hires. They gave him the autonomy and the authority to make the decision to reduce the 180-day requirement to 187. So our teachers are required to work 183 days. Obviously, the last day of school was the final day of the year. They are scheduled to return on Monday, the 29th, I believe it is, of August. Look at a calendar, so making sure I'm not making things up. Nope, I was definitely making things up. So it's Monday the 31st of August was when everyone would normally come back and we'd gather in the high school auditorium. Tuesday, the 1st of September, was to be a professional development day. Wednesday and Thursday, September 2nd and 3rd, were scheduled to be the first 2 days of school. We had another PD day pushed out into November. With that change, that would allow us to use that week, which would be, say, the 31st to the 3rd. Friday is a non-work day by contract. It would allow us to use those 4 days, and then we would have 2 additional days to use that following week. So Labor Day is the 7th, so we would potentially have the 8th and 9th as well, and start school, say, September 10th, have 2 days of school that week. And that would, in essence, give us, a solid 6 days to work with educators to, whether it's bringing, again, as Kim said, we have to be prepared. Even if we start on day 1, whenever day 1 is, in a fully returned model or a hybrid model, we have to be prepared to default back to the most restrictive, which is a fully remote model, depending on the trajectory of the virus. So we have to follow the data, and I will say Massachusetts has clearly done something right? The concept of wearing masks and the restrictions and loosening them gradually has worked. While the majority of the country is going in the wrong direction, we're going in the right direction. I'm hopeful we stay that course and we continue that trajectory. If that changes, I don't think it will be what's the phrase I'm looking? We will quickly go back to a remote learning model if we start trending in the wrong direction. So it's happened in other countries. Schools have opened up for 2 to 3 weeks, and then they've reverted back to not, to keeping them fully closed. So, so that is, I would say, to the question, Maureen, that is on the table. I would certainly be suggesting to you that we adjust the calendar and use that time so that whether we are planning and training teachers for a fully remote model, or we're bringing educators back to set up a classroom that is a very different classroom than the last time they taught standing in front of students, or that hybrid model, which would be obviously, that would be more logistics than it would be specific training. But I'm hopeful, and I would say between the authority that was given to the commissioner yesterday by the Board of Ed and comments that he made yesterday afternoon, I'm feeling hopeful that will become a reality, and we would adjust the starting day of school and use that time at the beginning of the year.
Maureen, did you have more questions? I think what I'm going to try and do is clear one member at a time, and then we can come back afterwards.
This is on the same topic, though. Do you want
Okay,
to?
if you're
Okay.
follow up, go for it, Erin, and then we'll come back to Maureen.
So in the guidance here, they talk a little bit about the training. Does DESE assume that the teachers are going to do the training, or the staff is going to do the training over the summer, or was that part of the anticipated requirement of getting them trained was once school starts ramping up?
I am not going to speak to what the Department of Ed was assuming. I will just simply say their assumptions are not always born in the field, right? So they're not necessarily, I should say, grounded in field experience. So I would say there was good conversation. The two largest, the two largest labor organizations in the state, the AFT and the MTA, the two teachers groups, were at the table. That dissolved, and I'm sure there's many reasons for that, but the MTA and AFT walked away. And so I think that voice was very much missing. So there isn't really an assumption. So for us, that's something we have to figure out. Obviously if we require, there will be so many teachers that are willing to use their own time over the summer to take personal PD or trainings. If we're going to require it and say we are putting a platform in place or whatever it is that we're saying, we have to provide training on actual work days to be able to require it. Obviously, that's only fair. So yeah, so there is no assumption on their part in regards to when that would happen. The fall would be ideal, right? I mean, many teachers have extra jobs in the summer, so even requiring them to come in over the summer is a challenge. So yeah, so the concept of that 177-day school year would be a major win in regards to figuring all that training out.
So before I go back to Maureen, does anyone else on the committee have questions on either calendar year or teacher training? Seeing none, so I'll come back to you, Maureen. Did you have other questions?
Marissa, Paul had a...
Yep. Oh, sorry, Paul Lees, go for it.
Yeah, so on the teacher training, what I...
Oh, we lost your audio, Paul.
Can you hear me?
There you
yes, now I can.
What I'm saying, on what I see on page 15 about teacher training is it says that implementation teams at the district and school levels to work intensively over the summer. Okay, and what I see the guidance coming from DESE on this is that the work is to be done during the summer by the year-round employees to prepare the staff that's not available during the summer to begin getting trained. That's how I see this guidance. If this all is going to be planned in the fall, I am fearful that we're going to lose a lot of learning as we did in the spring when everyone was trying to deal with the implications of remote learning.
Yeah, so I can kind of answer that one. The training or the PD plan, and it's going to be expanded. It's not just going to be for teachers. It's going to be for students. It's going to be available for parents and grandparents, and it's going to be remote. It's going to be on, like you can watch a video and all these different ways that you'll be able to access it. But that planning has already started internally. Like we actually have a list of different professional development around technology, the different platforms that people are requesting. And we got that information from that teacher survey that we sent out. So not only do we have what we think people are going to be asking for and need based on our plans, but we have people who are willing and are able to do that professional development, because that's the other piece when we surveyed teachers, is that they felt more comfortable having some of our champions who know Google Classroom or who know how to do a Zoom meeting and use all the bells and whistles with that to increase student engagement. So we have an ongoing list, and we absolutely will have a professional development plan, I would say, by the end of July. And then it's about bringing teachers back, and then they know in advance when the training dates are, and have chosen the training pieces that are appropriate for their needs, where they are at with their learning around technology.
So I have a follow-up question. I had asked before whether or not the teachers and the staff have been surveyed to determine special risk medical conditions as referenced on page 15. And so I posed that question again. Have they been surveyed as a group to determine who maintains the need for special return to work situation?
They have not yet, and similar to the surveys that we haven't done for parents yet, until we can say, here are the options. If I say, can you return, they're going to say, what's the model? So we need to be able to say, plan A is this, plan B is this, as a last resort, it's this. It'd be easy to say that's fully back, a hybrid, or a remote, but we don't know that yet because that is not yet clearly defined. There definitely have been people that have come forward, and there are folks that we know that we've spoken to and reached out to, but a general survey of staff we have not done yet, because similar to the concern about, I've seen some surveys done and submitted to families, and it basically is asking questions where options are being put on the table that the district may not be able to deliver. And so I think that's unfair, right, to families to say, if you would choose option A, and then we say 90% of you said option A, but by the way, we can't do option A. Similar to for faculty and staff, folks who have existing conditions, who have shared information before, have certainly come forward and had discussions with us. But when we do a formal survey, it will be to say, here's what we believe the fall will look like. Please let us know if you have a condition that's going to preclude you from participating.
We've already had that conversation, Brian. I think if we played the tape back, that would be the same question and answer that we posed 2 weeks ago. I again reiterate, I think it needs to be done now, and I think it needs to be done in a flexible manner so that you say, who out there has problems with a full return to class, okay, if that's one of the options. I think those questions need to be posed, because if you find out that you have all sorts of staffing problems or staffing restrictions, if that is the option, and you find that out in late August, mid-August, I think that's going to be problematic. And so I'm going to reiterate again and again that I think that needs to be done now. And I know in the last time we had this conversation, you specifically brought up the parent survey again. I really don't want to focus on the parents. I want to focus on the staff, because the delivery of education starts with the staff. And I think that's critically important. And that's why I reiterate, and I get back to that as being a necessary step going forward.
Understood.
So I'll just take a moment, and I seconded that when I spoke with Brian earlier today. Actually, that was one of the points that we hit on, and I understand that that the reopening group is actually looking at surveys next week. But I would disagree that the staff are more important than students and families. I think those are equally important, because you can't have one without the other. But I agree that sooner is better than waiting, because to plan, you need to have the maximum amount of information. That's just my take on it. Paul Goldner, did you have something else along that same vein?
Yeah, I was just going to say, I don't see a reason why we couldn't send out a survey asking if people are higher risk or if they have members of their household that are higher risk now. That's just information. So when we get to the models, we know what percentage of our staff is going to be potentially facing trouble if we're in an in-person model.
Aaron?
I know that we're talking about the staff right now, but you also may want to put out there how many families have somebody that's immunocompromised or some sort of situation similar, because you're going to have to know how many people you need to account for that don't feel comfortable coming back when you're planning this out. And I know the full return still allows for people that need or that are looking for a remote to still have it happen, according to what I read through this document or what I took from it.
Yeah, and the document's unclear on, and that question was posed directly to the commissioner. So as an attendance requirement, students are required to attend school, right, by mass law. If someone has a medical documentation that says their son or daughter is immunocompromised in some way, that for medical reasons, they shouldn't be in the general population. They shouldn't be in a classroom with other students with or without masks. That's a very different scenario than me making the choice as a parent to say, I don't feel comfortable sending my student back. And
Right.
my
It's not
understanding
just
is they,
the,
I was gonna say,
sorry,
they're gonna make a
Brian.
very clear delineation. My understanding is on what the attendance requirements are, that there would be a delineation between those two, between a parent making a choice and having a documented reason.
Yeah, and it's not always just the kid though, because in my household, my husband
Yep.
had a kidney transplant, and
Yep.
if the kids get sick and bring it home, he is very susceptible to getting sick and dying. So
Absolutely.
we have different standards in our house than most families have in their house, and I've worked a lot with the teachers in the past about trying to limit the germs and providing certain things for the classrooms to make that happen. So it's not just the kids, it's also what they're bringing home to their family.
Yep. Absolutely. So I'll use that. I was saying the student, but anything where there's a documented medical reason, whether it's a family member or the student themselves, absolutely. That's a different scenario than someone saying, I don't want to send my student back. And that's going to be a really hard discussion. And I'd be very interested to see the way the guidance will be listed. And it's going to be a hard discussion with staff as well, right? Because there's those staff who would be immunocompromised and so medically can't be exposed. There are people who are going to continue to have a childcare challenge, and there are going to be people who are simply uncomfortable. And the law is going to look at those three situations very differently in regards to what we are able to accommodate. And so there's the what we have to accommodate and what we choose to accommodate. So that's going to be a great challenge.
Paul Goldner, did you have something along the same line?
Yeah, continuing along the people in the household vein, the guidance was pretty long on child-to-child interactions, but not real much on adult-to-adult interactions, and we're going to be having adults in the same rooms in close proximity. And the researchers that they cited in terms of the child-to-adult transmissions are pretty open about saying they don't really know what the child to adult transmission is. It just looks lower from our preliminary hints. So I'm very concerned about the research that they used to justify this.
Linda?
Talking about sorry, go ahead.
Oh, sorry, Linda's been waiting, so.
Yep.
Linda, to find her on my screen, sorry.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you for bringing your therapy cat, by the way.
I know I keep putting him down. He keeps jumping up. About masks, I know that some kids are going to have problem wearing masks all day. What is the protocol for wearing masks? I myself have to wear a mask all day long. And I know that people that I work with have to take multiple breaks because of the circumstances that they have wearing a mask. Mm-hmm. So I was wondering how that was going to be accommodated.
So the guidance speaks about that very generally, that we have to provide. So anyone grade 2 and up and all faculty and staff are wearing masks all day, every day. That is the return, and everyone coming back is contingent on that. Talked about providing breaks where air can be exchanged, whether that's in a classroom opening a window or being outside. There was a discussion about giving a break every 30 minutes, 45 minutes over the course of a school day. That's a lot of breaks, and if those are happening going outside, that's going to be a challenge. So there hasn't been any guidance on specifically how to manage those breaks. We certainly have our opinions, but at the end of the day, it's there's also, even enforcing masks in public is a challenge, and who has the authority to police that, if you will. It's going to be a challenge. It's going to be a challenge. What happens when a student says no, right? And we say yes, and so we're having standoffs all the time. So I don't have a good answer for that yet.
Plus, if you go out in public, you see a lot of adults that aren't even wearing masks properly. You know, they'll have them on their chin or their nose will be exposed. So I foresee that being a huge issue in schools as well.
Especially with all the different types of masks and different wording that's on masks.
Yep. Yeah. So there's the actual misunderstanding of how to wear a mask. And then there's those that we know are going to come in without a mask and are going to refuse to put one on. We're going to find ourselves with some showdowns that we're going to have to find our way through.
All right, anything else on masks before we go on? Or I should say, let me open that up and just say any personal protective equipment. Paul Goldner?
Yeah, so the K-1 not being required to wear a mask, I know that's the guidance and that's going to be what we're expected to follow, but that's a concern too, because around about September, we're going to have these rooms full of kindergartners and first graders who are going to start sneezing because it's fall and back to school and they're not wearing masks, and we're going to be sending them to the nurses area for the COVID-like symptoms, and we're going to have 50 kindergartners and first graders in the area for students with COVID-like symptoms, and one of them is going to actually have the coronavirus. They're going to sneeze in that area, and we're suddenly going to have a whole bunch of sick kindergartners and first graders, and then that's going to spread, and all of a sudden we're going to have 100 cases in the district.
So that's a fair amount of conjecture, but does anybody else have anything on that, Maureen? And I'm going to apologize, Michelle. It's a meeting of the school committee in the public, so you're welcome to email the committee afterwards or email Brian directly with questions, but we can't handle public questions during the school committee discussions. Maureen, did you have
I think Kaylee had her hand up.
Oh, Kaylee had it? Sorry. I missed you, Kaylee.
Completely okay.
My other laptop can fit tons of screens, but this one I can only get 9 at a time, so I apologize.
Completely okay. On the topic of masks, and I think someone had brought up the wording that people are having on their masks, could we just simply solve it by writing it into the dress code for the foreseeable future? Or is it a larger
thought? One would argue that a state mandate has a little bit more teeth than the dress code by policy of the school committee. But by that, you know, certainly there's no more authority given to, you know, the principal or an assistant principal to administer and enforce the dress code than there would be masks. But wouldn't be a bad thing to have.
I meant more along the lines of like certain images or wordings and.
Gotcha.
But that as well.
Yes.
Yeah.
I guess I would say, I mean, the language there talks about the attire being appropriate. So whether it's a T-shirt, as you know, as a student, right, whether you come in with a T-shirt that is offensive and may disrupt things, or it's written on a mask, we would certainly handle that the same way. So it would be anything like a hat, a T-shirt, in this case, a mask, strategically printed. Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
We joke, but we know, Kaylee, it'll happen, right? We'll have those discussions, unfortunately.
Just real quick, I did check with Mass Association of School Committees, and they do anticipate having a full list of policies that will need to be updated. They're attempting, I feel like I have this conversation over and over again. They're attempting to not release that until there's something definite out there, because they don't want to go ahead and have people do work and then have it not be the case and have to undo that work or attempt to modify it again. So, so I don't know, you know, they're essentially, from my understanding, is behind the scenes kind of continually doing that updating and then re-updating and so on. And when things seem to kind of hit a plateau, I'm guessing, is when we'll actually see some recommendations on policies to look at, and also some samples on them from different, you know, of different policy language that could be included. All right, Maureen.
Okay, so another question I had as I read through this guidance, I guess I'm going to try to combine them. It relates to like increased costs that we might incur before the start of school. So like on page 21, they talk about doing inspections of the HVAC systems for all the schools, replacing filters, things like that. So obviously, I'm assuming that would be a cost that we would have to deal with. But I guess a bigger cost that's a concern is where it talks about desks and how desks have to be 3 feet apart and they have to be all facing forward. I couldn't help but think about all our elementary schools don't use desks. They have tables, at least in the, I believe, up through 4th grade or 3rd grade, they all use tables. So how are we supposed to handle that? Or are we going to be purchasing desks for the lower grades?
So that's part of the that kind of pressure test we're doing. But yes, on face value, actually the call on yesterday afternoon with the commissioner, he gave slide after slide of showing potential classroom setups. So it's measuring from the edge of the seat to the edge of the seat, not from the desk to the desk. That's that 3-foot perimeter. So that students are actually 3 feet apart. But yeah, so that's a challenge. We, at Pine Grove School with the renovation, almost all tables throughout the school. So if we were able to put a student on either end of a table facing each other, 4 feet apart, that still doesn't follow the guidance because students aren't breathing to the back of another student's head. So we've got to map that out and then come up with if desks, yes, that could be a potential cost. Talking with another district that has an order for thousands and thousands of new desks, or thousands of dollars worth of new desks. I should say that in this guidance it talks about, because this is theoretically a budget / September opening agenda item, the commissioner talks about a level services plus assumption. There really is no definition about what that means. There is discussion about up to $225 per student that's being made available by some COVID relief funds. $500 million that was originally earmarked towards towns for COVID relief that might be repurposed in some capacity towards schools, some specific $25 million for technology grants that we likely wouldn't qualify for. But my assumption is a lot of these funds will not be just a straight student-based formula, but some type of means-tested formula, which based on the assumptions in the Chapter 70 and how we've fared there, we would not necessarily see a lot of those funds. So there are funds. We can expect some funds. I'm hopeful that at a minimum, the talk about level services hopefully means at least we're not talking about a $2 million decrease. But certainly we need to continue to prepare. So there would be costs. A lot of the, again, working through this, but a lot of those costs for replacing filters and all that, that's regular routine summer maintenance, preventative maintenance that's done and planned for. But added costs, I think I mentioned last week, we have Northern Glass coming in to do hygiene shields in all the office spaces. Still working out the plan on what we need to do for setting up a separate nursing space that would be for students suspected, as Paul mentioned, the kids who are suspected of having COVID-like symptoms go to one location, those routine blood sugar check for a student who's diabetic or to take a medication at noontime, a separate location for that. So mapping all that out with the district nurses and head custodians. So all those are in process and all adding to the puzzle. Kyle's knee deep in an initial PPE order of masks and hand sanitizer and much more extensive gowns and shields and everything, nitrile gloves for nurses, but basically masks for everyone else, the paper masks. So putting all that on paper, and it's not short money. It's not short money. So in the coming weeks, there are districts who've gone ahead and ordered, got really aggressive, and I will say, so the end of year process for a region versus a city or a town is quite different. And when a city or town school department has money at the end of the year, often they're looking to spend it rather than giving it back to the town. Obviously, as a region, we control our own fate, and what we have in reserves is what we manage at the end of the year. So that there are many districts who move forward and made some purchases with the final kind of leftover funds, if you will, from the end of the year that ended yesterday. But we have not placed any orders yet. We're right there, ready to say go. So working on quotes with other vendors as far as PPE, and then the equipment, like you mentioned, Maureen, desks and such. That's not going to be nearly as challenging to get as apparently gloves are the hottest item right now, and hand sanitizer. So those items, we have a much longer lead time, and so we're ready to jump on those. But yes, significant costs.
Paul Mayette.
Staying on the subject of desks for a second, the tables are generally being used for pedagogical reasons. Has there been any particular discussion about either different expectations for how instruction is delivered and potential professional development to help teachers adjust to that, teaching kids in rows and that going back a few decades in that regard?
That's a great question. I don't know if Kim, that topic has come up yet with the working group, but absolutely.
So, yeah.
I was gonna say, absolutely. If you look at they're not part of this, but the maps that the Department of Ed shared yesterday, literally the suggestion is you take everything out of classrooms except for desks. So you've got a teacher space at the beginning of the classroom or the head of the classroom, and then everything else is desks spaced apart. So storage, particularly at the elementary level, where you've got stations and reading areas and circle, where group meetings happen, all of that goes by the wayside, and it's strictly set up to be able to bring students in, have them sitting in rows 3 feet apart all day long. So absolutely, it will require training. Go ahead, Kim. I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, I was just going to say we have started to talk about that. It was absolutely on the. And they were talking too about the desks that everybody has to be facing in the same direction, because not a desk, but a table, because that's another concern. They were able to space them out, but they were spaced out facing each other instead of facing forward. So, yeah.
Paul Goldner.
So thinking about those elementary school rooms as just desks with no storage and no stations, that's not only going to have implications for the pedagogy, it's going to have implications for how still those children can sit, for how long, and their behavior problems that are going to manifest as a result of having to sit really still because the desk is exactly 3 feet apart and having nothing to move to throughout the course of the day that's different.
Yep. Especially when the guide specifically talks about not mixing students, keeping them in the same cohort. So it's not like you could even technically have them change, get a little change of scenery, and we have to map out how students come into the classroom, how they leave the classroom, so that not only are they not closer than 3 feet when they're sitting, but when they're entering and exiting, they're also no closer than 3 feet. So absolutely, Paul, that's.
Yeah. And sitting there with the mask on, feeling like they can't breathe. It's just, yeah, there's just so many things. I don't know how many educators were on that team at the Department of Ed, but I feel like they were lacking.
Paul Goldner.
Okay, so again, I guess, what is actually the social emotional benefit to our young children for going back under these circumstances?
One might argue none.
Yeah.
Sorry, Narissa.
So I have a question too, Brian, because this has come up with a couple of people that I've talked to about this guidance. My understanding is that when masks are to be removed, that they want to err more towards the 6 feet rather than the 3 feet, that the 3 feet is kind of like all other safeguards in place. So if students are eating in classrooms now, how do you have desks that are 3 feet apart, but once students remove masks to eat lunch or snack or whatever other meal it happens to be, how do you then maintain a 6-foot distance? Is that being considered in the district, and has that been answered at the state level at all?
The exact question was asked by a superintendent, and the answer was, that's a great question. We assume some kind of rotation, but we need to work through that. So I can tell you there is no rotation, right? If you've got a classroom and it's full because there are 21 students sitting 3 feet apart, there is nowhere to rotate to. So it's, they're suggesting that we use open spaces like the gymnasium, auditorium, larger, music rooms where there's open space, having class outside as much as possible. Yeah, there is no possibility, right? I mean, if we've got classrooms mapped out for 3 feet, and it's not, I forget the term you used, Narissa. It wasn't a suggestion. It was the 3 foot is contingent upon having a mask on. So during those breaks, we have to provide a situation where students are 6 feet apart.
All right, other questions on spacing, Caitlin? Or desks, or you're muted. You can't unmute. I feel like we're in some sort of a game.
I did it.
Right,
alternative universe.
Sorry. I want to echo what Paul just said, because behaviorally in the elementary level, also in the high school level, for teachers, sending a child on a walk is, I wouldn't say the gold standard, but like the easiest way to kind of remove and reset, or the bathroom, or getting up to put a book back, or doing any of those things. So when you think preschool K 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 minimum, what are we supposed to do with what are teachers supposed to do? Saying like, you have to stay in the seat, but their IEP or their 504 clearly states multiple breaks throughout the day. Because then you're out of compliance on that side of things.
Yeah, so back, this is one of those, I think Narissa said, there's gonna be a lot more questions than answers tonight. But when we look at that 10th slide, when one of the things off to the right is prerequisites for in-person opening, remote learning process, or remote learning resources, special programs and populations, that's a key, right? Literally tonight, as we're sitting here, we just got the final guidance, Dave, it's hot off the press, for summer school, for our special ed extended school year program. We just got it tonight, and it's theoretically starting next week. So this is the pace it's been happening. We have a sense of what's in it, but we don't know for sure. So that's a huge issue, is, just the basics of how do you provide an accommodation that might be being able to take a walk based off of a 504, all the way on out to required intensive services required by an IEP. There's no answer. There's no answer.
I can say that, I was just going to say that the teachers have the same questions and concerns and frustrations, without a doubt, that I'm hearing tonight. It's the same questions and concerns, without a doubt. And it just makes me wonder if the Department of Ed, because I'm assuming that they have heard a lot of feedback since this initial document was released, that, I don't know. I don't know.
I mean, I would say hearing Dr. Lloyd Fisher, the arguments about the downsides, right? So the argument is the negative effects of remaining out of school are greater than the potential risk medically of bringing students back. I personally disagree with that, but that's the argument that they're using. But even if that argument were true, that assumption of those risks and what they mean, 50 to 60 to 70, maybe to a 99% of them are just illogical for anyone who has set foot in a classroom. Several of you, or the committee members, are actually, are educators, have experienced as, and those who are parents, you've been in classrooms. There's just no way that realistically this is going to happen. Back to Paul's point, you think about a class of 20 first graders, or say third graders even, with masks, and they're required, there's no option. What do we do when 3 of them just decide they need to get up and walk around? I don't know. It creates a completely impossible situation to manage. And ultimately then it's, like you said, Paul, you question the social and emotional impact and benefit. It creates a worse scenario than just calling it is, saying it is what it is and going with a fully remote or some type of hybrid model. So, yeah.
Kaylee?
On the topic of the question of how we enter and spacing out and everything, that would also mean that we couldn't use cubby spaces and lockers, or even on the high school level, when we come into the classroom, we put our bag next to our desk. If you have 2 kids in desks that just so happen to feel better leaning one way or the other, putting their bag on one side, you have to have more than that 3 feet, because personally, I know my backpack, when I have all my stuff in it, takes up basically a foot. So how is that going to work?
Yeah, we actually have to prescribe that, right? We have to say your backpack goes on the right side. We have to say you come into the classroom, take a right and go up the back aisle. So that's literally, it's a great point. Literally, we have to map it out that closely to be able to confirm that we're keeping students 3 feet apart. And then you mentioned lockers, same thing. It's not that this necessarily precludes the use of lockers, but we have to make sure, as you know, lockers are not 3 feet apart. So we have to make sure that no one's going to their locker if they're going to be next to someone at the same time that might be within 3 feet. So it would have to be assigned times when you can get to your locker. So the logistics at the high school, speaking to the cohorts, and at the elementary, the cohorts and keeping students together is much more manageable. If we try to do a cohort at the high school, we completely limit what you can take as far as your classes and opportunities, Kaylee, as a student. And so there's even in the guidance, they've relaxed that to say as much as possible at the high school level. But it's impossible. It's completely impossible.
More questions on, I'm going to call this the big social distancing / classroom structure. Kaylee?
So this was more, you touched on it before, that we wouldn't be able to have gym class, obviously, because of how it's transmitted. Does that mean that we're going to be waiving the gym credit requirements for the high school students? Or, because I know a lot of people structure their class schedules, because we scheduled the year ahead back before Corona even happened.
Yeah.
Are we planning on waiving that so that we don't have to restructure our whole plans? I know a lot of students will structure out everything they're going to take freshman year with very little deviation.
Yeah. And some students would plan even multiple years all at once. So absolutely. And we have to figure out, if we can't offer a class, we can't hold you accountable for not having had the opportunity to take the class. So again, that's a graduation requirement set by the school committee, but similar to the commissioner going to the Department of Education to say, can we relax the 180 days or the 990 hours, or the requirement that we take MCAS, which actually required legislative action. Same thing would happen. As we identify those challenges, we would bring that to the committee and say, look, we can't negatively impact you for a decision you had no control over. So yes.
Other questions on social distancing, classroom structure, like physical classroom structure? Maureen?
I was just going to ask, like, if anybody's been in the high school when they change classes, when that bell rings, like, I don't understand how that will work without completely altering the daily schedule of a high school or a middle school student. Because I don't see how they're supposed to get to class all at the same time. So, I'm assuming that's something that's being discussed.
I'm going to let Kaylee step in here with her firsthand knowledge.
And it's not even that, it's also that we can't release one classroom at a time, because that's the beauty of Triton. We're not tracked. So if we released it class by class, you would have one kid showing up even at like half an hour before the next if we had to account for distancing.
Yep.
So I definitely think that's a good question to bring forward.
Absolutely. And they talked about creating pods or cohorts so that you have a group of students working kind of within, call it the corner, a quarter of the building. But as soon as you do that, you completely limit the access, because we don't have, if we had 10 of every discipline teacher in every department, we could absolutely manage that, but that's not the case, right? There's fewer in the arts, some departments have 10, some have 8. So without the ability to break those teachers up and kind of share them between cohorts, we would be absolutely impacting students in the classes. Back to Kaylee's point about students always plan a year ahead. Some plan 2-3 years ahead in regards to knowing what they want to take and get under their belt so they can start taking electives. So we would absolutely limit what students would have access to. So it's I know that is something Megan Ober, who's the director of guidance, who's the grand scheduler. She's sadly on vacation this week working on the schedule, but that's absolutely an impact, is figuring out, that's the challenge right now, is getting a schedule that would work, that allows us to move 680 students around the high school in a way that we can ensure that they're 6 feet or 3 feet apart.
Other questions on social distancing? Sorry, I'm trying to scan everything, but trying to make sure everybody's getting.
Paul Goldner.
Paul Goldner.
I guess thinking about those cohorts again in a couple of different ways, there are elective courses that are cross grade level. So if we restrict access to the elective courses in order to cohort by grade level, then, like as you said, you're cutting people out from the courses that they would be in. And then also from the hybrid perspective at the high school level, A group and B group, how are we going to make sure that we have cohorts that are pulling half from every class in the high school? Because I know that a lot of the scheduling software runs alphabetically sometimes. So you see clusters of students with the same last name in the same class. And then in another class, it's a different cluster. So you have one section that's got all of the S's and another section that's got all of the C's. And then it's different from the science to the clustering for the hybrid model.
Is a nightmare. It's a cluster, if you will.
Kaylee.
All right, this also kind of goes back to the mental health aspect that we talked about earlier too. I know that there's a lot of students that personally they take one elective, and that's, for a lot of kids, that's the one thing they look forward to in the day.
Mm-hmm.
So if we talk about cutting back electives, there's going to be a really large issue on the back of the strain that guidance then gets.
Mm-hmm.
So do we have a plan for implementing that, or is it just possibly another thing to throw on the table?
I would say it's another thing to throw on the table now. We haven't made any decisions to say we're not offering electives, right? So I can tell you, Mr. Kelly, and talking to Ms. Ober and having the discussion, absolutely, our goal is, regardless of the model, is to have as normal a routine as possible, so that when we can return, we're prepared to return. So obviously what September looks like, whether that's fully remote, hybrid, or all back, there's a lot still to determine, but we've made no decisions yet in regards to say we're not going to fill in the blank. It'll be a kind of more of a backward design to say, after scheduling, after making that final call, we've realized that we can't, and then you'd fill in the blank there about what we can't do.
All right, other questions on, Maureen, go ahead.
One thing that we haven't talked about is busing. I know that Kim mentioned that there is a group working on transportation, but is it are they discussing surveying parents to find out who would and would not be using busing?
Yeah, so that's, again, back to my famous slide 10, transportation is coming in the final guidance. They gave us nothing. There are some people that were involved in that process, and I've seen some pretty alarming potential situations that is suggesting, but actually Kyle and I are meeting. So you have two of the transportation subgroups sitting right here. So we're actually meeting on Monday with NRT to start that discussion, correct?
Or later they weren't able to make that happen.
Oh, okay, so
Later
we're
next
meeting
week
next
for sure. Yeah.
So there's no answer there. But again, promising signs, as we talked about the fact that we're going to survey parents. It's not just going to be once, it's going to be multiple times as we have information that we can ask questions. One of the questions they suggest is anticipating who will return, which again, when we say, here's what we believe the plan will be, what are your plans to return or not? One of the suggested questions would be, do you plan to ride the bus? And that would allow us to potentially reduce the number of runs if we know that families don't plan on using transportation. By law, we can't do that. That was one of the things we talked about on that transportation commission that I was part of at the state level. And there's a recommendation to adjust that. It'd be great to see that gets adjusted this year, because if we know half the kids aren't going to ride the bus, there may be no savings because we need to socially distance on the bus as well. But the early projection of riding the buses at 25% capacity, there's no way that will stand, just simply because of the fact that we would have to run our bus routes 4 times a day, our complete routes 4 times in the morning and 4 times in the afternoon. So there would be significant added cost, obviously, to do that. So that would be staggered start times and massive new costs. So there is no clear information on that yet.
Okay. Plus, there's a concern of, with increased, I'm assuming there'll be increased parents driving their students to school, just the traffic flow of increased cars with possibly the same amount of buses, just students distance, we could be needing the, local police to help us kind of get people in and out of these parking lots safely. So,
Kaylee?
I also think we should mention on the topic of transportation that this year we will probably have more students taking the bus if their parents weren't comfortable with it, because so many haven't been able to get their licenses while everything's been going on.
Interesting.
So that's going to be another issue coming up.
Yeah. Great point.
Good point. Yeah. All right. Anybody else on the topic of transportation? I just want to add one of my concerns, which I had already mentioned earlier today too, is that on the Board of Ed call, a number of questions were asked by the Board of Ed members of the commissioner, and one of them was asking about, temperature checks, which they have opted not to do in this set of guidance, and how schools are going to be even remotely certain that a student does not have COVID symptoms coming into the building. And the response was that they would be asked upon entering the bus or entering the building if they had any symptoms since the last time that they were in school. And I'm concerned about putting that on our bus drivers as well, if that's going to be the case. And I mean, if we had to put monitors on the bus, that would be obviously a significant additional expense. So that's a question that I'm hoping will get answered at some point along the way as well, because I think that's I think through all of this, one of the things I keep coming back to as I keep talking to administrators and everyone else is that there's going to be a tremendous amount of guilt no matter which way this goes on the people that are making the decisions. And I fully feel for Kim and for Brian, and the committee is going to have to deal with this down the road as well. And to have the bus drivers be the gatekeepers potentially to say, there was a student and I asked and they said they were fine, but they looked flushed, but I let them on anyway because they were fine. I think that's a tremendous amount of burden as well. You don't want to put that on anybody, but that's really difficult to put on, a bus driver, I think.
And then once they're on the bus, then to be the monitor to keep kids socially distanced.
Yes,
which
this is true.
you know that looking backwards from those seats, that with the height of them now, you don't see any of the kindergartner through third graders. You start to see heads about the fourth grade on back to the sixth graders at the elementary level. So yeah.
Yes. Back to Kaylee, and then we'll go back to Paul Goldner, and then I'll see if anybody else has their hands up.
Oh, Kaylee, you're still, there you go.
I know that the guidance has said that we don't have to do temperature checks. Would it be more feasible just to do them upon like entrance to a bus or to a classroom?
So it would be a time issue, right? It's we could certainly buy thermometers, and there were districts who talked about getting thermal scanners, which basically like a kind of a metal detector you walk through at the airport that gives your temperature. Huge cost. The bigger question is, it's the false negatives and false positives. So someone might have a temperature because kindergartners, when they're running around on the playground and then they come in, their surface temperature is going to be hotter than 98.6. So that might give a false temperature or false reading to think that someone has a temperature, and they don't have a temperature. Their body is just warmer. So it's not the logistics of it. It's the reason they backed away from it is because of the fact that it's not a good indicator of whether or not someone is sick or has COVID or flu or a common cold. And that's, I will say that was one of the things they talked about. There's going to be apparently a massive campaign for the flu season and flu shots, because obviously when the symptoms are relatively similar, not exact, but are relatively similar between COVID and the flu, that's going to be hard. Who has the basic flu and should certainly go home, but our response when someone has the flu is very different than when someone is diagnosed with COVID. So,
Paul?
A couple of things there is that health check-in is going to take substantial time, whether it's on the buses, slowing down the bus routes, or walking into the building and having kids checking in with someone. So entry into the building from parent drop-off is going to take longer, assuming that we're doing it at the doors to the building or the doors to the buses. And then sort of the other point is that how many kids are going to come into school, their parents are going to see, oh, you sneezed once or whatever, so here's a dose of Tylenol and you're going to be fine, and then you're going to look sick at 11 or 12.
Yep.
I think we can all just say yes to that one. Yes. All right. Other questions along that line? And I saw Caitlin first, and then back to Kaylee.
This is going to have a huge impact on attendance policy for students. Say every parent does the right thing, and if their kid even looks like they might slightly be sick or have a cough, says stay home. That for high school, and it's got a bigger issue. But even we're talking a huge loss of days.
Yeah, absolutely. Right.
And I know they can switch to maybe online learning or something that way, but that, when you look at how you promote to the next grade, attendance counts.
Absolutely. And
so is there something happening there?
Well, so that's part of there's been discussion about attendance policies, and will that be relaxed or will that continue to be enforced? And as I was saying earlier, if a student's not coming to school because of a medical diagnosis and we're needing to provide a remote environment versus someone who wasn't feeling well, and after the fifth day, we're certainly reaching out, nurses are reaching out, how come you're not coming to school? But it creates an untenable situation to be able to make those decisions and to figure out, we're then you're talking about the bus drivers, then we're putting the nurses in the situation where they're having to make a call whether a student's genuinely sick or is taking advantage of the situation, or what the overall reason is. So there is no, as of this moment in time, the attendance laws and requirements exist and they're assumed to be in place for September.
And I would say too, I mean, part of our accountability rating is based on attendance, like, right? So again, that
Chronic
has to
absenteeism.
change. Yeah, chronic absenteeism, which is going to be huge. In addition to not just the students, but we talked today about staff not feeling well. Because they're more at risk than the students themselves, just because of the age group of our largest group of staff. So they potentially could be out more. And then we have an issue already getting substitutes on a good day, let alone when we try to get some folks who have retired to come back, again, high risk population. So that's just a whole nother piece to this puzzle that, you know, I think it's great that I always try to look for the positive. There are some great questions, concerns that have really broken down every specific detail. Today, one of the teachers talked about walking in the hallways with a piece of rope that was tied 6 feet apart so the kids know. But it's just an enormous amount of questions related to bringing everybody back. And there just doesn't seem at this point right now any answers that we have until we get some more guidance. Yeah, it's tough. It's tough being in this position and like Brian said, and not being able to answer it and agreeing with you and still kind of having to work through some of these situations.
All right, I'm gonna go Kaylee and then Paul Mayette and then Linda. So Kaylee, you're up next.
So we had mentioned like the chronic absenteeism part and how a bunch of kids will just say that they're feeling sick.
Yep.
I can tell it from being in a classroom, there are so many kids that will come to school because they're so terrified of missing out on just even a review day for a test that's 2 weeks away,
Yep.
that they'll say they're fine and they go home and they are not fine at all.
Mm-hmm.
How do we accommodate that either? So.
There's no way to, right? I mean, that's a great question. And on any given day, it means that student might be transmitting the flu or a common cold or some general illness. But if the person is carrying COVID, yeah, there's no way to.
Paul Mayette?
So tangentially related to attendance, is there any talk, as you talk about schedules and mask breaks and movement in the hallway, about loosening the requirement on the time on learning, the 990 hours there?
Yeah, there's been a kind of a joint discussion about the 990 or 1080 for elementary, along with the 180 days. So there are talked about changing the actual school day, right? So the length of the day. So obviously, if we were doing shorter days or we were doing staggered start and stop time, all these discussions about loading kids onto the bus and having to do those checks or even walking in the door or the parent drop off, that all adds added time to the beginning and the end of the day. So if we were doing some kind of staggered, I don't think anyone would just say, let's just do a half day for the sake of doing a half day. But if a 6.5 hour calendar or school day became a 5.5 hour, we would need some relaxing of not just the number of days, but the hours on learning. So both of those, I would say, out of all the discussions and questions asked, that is asked most routinely by superintendents.
Linda?
In regards to the absenteeism, if any one of the students tests positive for COVID, that could potentially take out a whole classroom.
Yes.
And over the course of a school year, those same cohorts of children could be taking out a couple of times, depending on how many students. Is the Department of Ed taking some of the absenteeism into account for those types of things?
Yeah, so the commissioner's comments about the attendance requirement have been, they're looking at it comprehensively about the basic requirement. If someone is out because we know they actually they've been diagnosed, or we know in working with the Department of Ed, and that's another one of the requirements that will be part of, or the guidance that will be issued with the final guidance, is what we do, what the protocol is if a student is diagnosed if a staff member is diagnosed, the typical everyone in that class would be sent home and quarantined for 14 calendar days. So in working with our Department of Health, local Department of Health and their health agents, those protocols, I mean, we know that's the standard is, everyone gets home, the school closes, we disinfect. Additionally, those that were in the closest proximity are asked and required to quarantine for 14 days. And so if that happens, once there is a diagnosis or someone is suspected, that goes through the town health agent. So that isn't something that, none of us that work for the district, except school nurses, are doctors or nurses. We're not medical experts. So we don't make that judgment, but once someone is diagnosed, they do absolutely get handed over, if you will, to the town health agents, who works with the state DPH and does all the monitoring, and is the one that decides when they can be released and when the family can be released back to the general population, but when they can be released from their quarantine and such. So yes, the specific protocols would be released in the final guidance as well.
So on a follow-up question to that, would there then be some type of remote learning for that cohort of students that now has to stay home for 14 days?
Yes, unequivocally, yes. So that's been made clear, which is one of the greatest challenges, is if we're in a hybrid model, for example, originally the hybrid model was discussed as students are remote one week and then in person the following week, staggering. They did say, you could do it both ways. You could do it every other day or every other week. We would have that autonomy. But we need to provide a remote scenario, a remote learning opportunity for any student who isn't able to be in school, right? The isn't able is yet to be determined on how we qualify that. Some districts, if you look at Lexington's, they basically are surveying parents and giving them the option. We don't have the staffing resources to be able to say we can accommodate all the students we need to in classrooms, as well as being able to accommodate all of them that choose remote. Certainly that's going to be part of the survey question and discussions, but we have to provide a remote opportunity for students who are confirmed to not be able to be in school.
All right, looking next at Paul Lees and then Erin.
So Brian, are you thinking of utilizing different plans for different schools, different buildings?
No, actually that question was asked, and it was the district has to have a plan. So certainly, right, if something happened at one school, I suppose there might be a case where that might be appropriate, but that question was asked, and certainly for us, it's a much smaller district, but when you have Boston or Lynn with 40 some odd schools, there was a discussion about different approaches. The city of Lynn actually proposed the concept of going remote at the secondary level and then using all of their buildings to bring all of their elementary students in and spread all of their elementary students through all 40 some odd buildings. So in a city like that, perhaps, but no, that question was actually asked yesterday point blank, and the response was no, that a district has to produce a plan that is universally designed and implemented across the district.
At each building, the same way?
At each building, the same way, right. So we would be, right, so if we say we're starting off hybrid, then we pre-K through 12 as a Triton district, all 5 schools are starting off in a hybrid model.
Erin, go ahead. Oh, Erin, we lost your audio.
There you go. Oh.
How about that?
There you go.
Okay, sorry. Going back to the discussion about like the cohorts that if somebody gets sick and they have to go home and then do online learning, but my thoughts are with that as well as expanding that a little bit with saying, the concerns with multiple teachers and that sort of thing. What's the connectivity like in the classrooms and the availability that if a teacher had to teach remotely at the same time there's students sitting in front of them, that's a capability? Like, is there a possibility that there is enough connectivity in there going on that a teacher could actually host both remote and classroom students at the same time to teach the same materials. And I know that there's a technology like grant piece that was in this packet, and I'm sure that money is going to go quickly, but is there any consideration along the lines of that with beefing up the technology in the schools through those grants to be able to allow some of these classrooms to be retrofit so that they can have that capability?
I would say yes, and actually that began last year actually for a student who was medically unable to attend the high school, and so it was a female student, and she was actually participating in classes. And it's very simple. It's not a lot of money, you know, with the Wi-Fi access and a Chromebook and I think it was actually not Skype. It was a separate camera. It was, you know, $150 to get a setup that basically that sat at the front of the room. We did it in a synchronous model, meaning the student knew that she had class from whatever 8:10 to 9:15, and so she logged on and watched the class during that time. Obviously, we would have the ability to move into recording. Certainly, teachers I know already working on recording lessons and hosting a library of video recorded lessons that can be viewed asynchronously, right? So I can say I need to watch 3 lessons over the course of a couple days. I can do it when it's convenient for my family and when I can get onto the computer. So that's absolutely on the table and in discussion, yes, and not nearly as cost prohibitive as you would think. Certainly setting up, you know, there are vendors who are promoting Zoom rooms, and, you know, for a quick $10,000, you can make your room a Zoom room. We don't need to spend that kind of money. It's hundreds of dollars per classroom, and if everything is set up, it's very doable. A lot more easily implemented at the secondary level than at the elementary level, right? There's more lecture style than at the secondary level than there is traditionally at the elementary level, but certainly doable, yes. And I would just add that's something that we have to. That's a negotiation requirement. So anytime someone's on camera, that is something that we are required. It's mandatory bargaining. So, but teachers, you know, did it voluntarily as part of a kind of a pilot last year at the high school. So we've already seen that it works well.
All right, who's next? Scanning through. Seeing none.
I see Paul Lees.
Oh, Paul Lees, go for it, Paul.
Just want to talk.
We got you. Now
Yes.
good. Yes.
Okay. So I just want to talk generally. You know, when we talk about attendance policies and things like that, I firmly believe that the state looked the other way in the last 2 months of this last school year, and I think they're prepared to do that in the future. This is a pandemic. I mean, you know, the requirements about hours and this and that. I don't think that's ever going to see the light of day. These are my own thoughts, and I don't think we should focus on those types of things. I think the goal in all of this is not to focus on what's hard or what we can't do or how do we separate first graders, but rather focus on what we can do, okay, and what we can prepare and try to simplify things. Like I know that athletics and extracurriculars aren't even commented on in the state's plan, except at the very end. I think that's something that we need to put on the very back burner, okay? I think we need to look at the meal, look at education as a meal, okay, and those other things as a dessert. Right now, we just can't have the dessert. We've got to bite the bullet. These are my own personal thoughts, because anytime I'm faced with a problem in life, I try to simplify everything that I'm dealing with. And I think that's what we need to do here. You talk about gym. Well, this district doesn't have a good health curriculum, okay? It's time to toss out the PE gym, okay, across the board, and have the PE teachers teach a health curriculum in the gym. Everybody 6 feet apart. That's easy. Okay, and I just think step by step, those are the things that we have to focus on to pull this thing together. You know, the state keeps saying this is guidance, and that's all it is. It's guidance. The only time the word requirement appears in any of their literature is when it deals with safety. Okay, and so that's what we need to focus on. Okay, a requirement deals with safety. Everything else is guidance, and what we have to do as a district is put our plans together and do it early. And get ready. So I talked about teacher surveys. I also think we need to survey the teachers about who wants to step up and do the right thing in pandemic times, despite the fact that it's not contractually required, and get involved with training during the summer. And I know some people say, yeah, you're going to make us work for free. You want us to work for free. I don't want anything. I want you to do what's right, okay? And if the teachers decide that they're willing to be trained during the summer, great. And if they don't want to, that's their prerogative. They're not contractually obligated to do that. But the bottom line is, as a school district, are we going to hit the ground running in August, at the end of August, or are we going to be trying to figure it out? And I don't want to be part of a district that's trying to figure it out. I want to, I want the school leaders, the school administrators to pull the teacher leaders, the staff leaders, and everybody else together in this so that they recognize that if we're going to try to teach and get these kids in a better place than they are now, then you have to reach down deep and you have to contribute like we are right now meeting in July, okay? We don't meet in July, okay? For all you new people on the thing, we don't meet for the next 7 weeks, but we're going to because we've got to try to voice the concerns that we've heard in the public and our own thoughts about this whole thing. So I look at it this way, and I know it's different than a lot of the people who have raised questions about the different problems, but I think we need to simplify and move forward in that fashion, and we need to try to pull the people in the district that are willing to pull in the oar now and early and just get our plans put in place.
I guess the one thing I would say is, so the 50 individuals who are part of the working group, 50 plus individuals, certainly are doing so voluntarily. We can give them 12-1 credit, but we're not paying them to come and do that work. So there are absolutely people involved. I don't disagree at all that we are, right? This is all in motion. We're just not ready to submit a plan to you to say, this is what we believe is the best approach, because we're teasing that out. The only issue I would say in regards to saying, let's bring in some of the teachers who are willing, is we can't require something, right? So make something up, but put a new platform in place. We can't require it until we provide the training for everyone. So that would be great if people want to be part of that over the summer, but if only half come forward, we still need to deal with the other half come the end of August into the early September. So that's not a roadblock entirely, but we can't require it until we've provided the opportunity for all that training. So
I know, Brian, if half come forward, then my glass is half full.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
When school starts, it's half full, and that's the way this whole thing's got to be approached.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would argue it is being approached. I don't think that's a have to. It's happening. Yeah. Yeah.
Other questions? All right. I always wait till the end.
Paul Goldner has his hand.
Oh, Paul Goldner.
Oh, I'm sorry, Paul Mayette. Sorry.
Paul Mayette.
Getting my Pauls. Paul the Third.
We'll come up with the nicknames.
That's right.
I think my greatest concern, and I'm very skeptical about our ability to avoid this, is that we'll put these plans in place and something will change dramatically on us. We'll start remotely, or we'll start hybrid and wind up in remote. And I guess I have a lot of concerns for that. First, for special ed students, the difficulty in that, in making those adjustments for those students who rely on schedules, who rely on that type of routine. And secondly, for staff, I think the state seems to assume that moving from hybrid to remote to all in is, just shifting the instruction to a different location. And I would argue that it's not. And I guess I really have a question. I as far as this goes, it sounds like these are all things being considered, and I just want to thank Kim and everybody for that. The fact and Brian for the fact that you guys really seem to be grasping this whole picture and taking those things in, because I have a funny feeling whatever we put forth at first is going to change on us.
And I guess I would just say, I obviously agree with that stance. And, if you all feel differently and feel like you want to have a plan now and put something out to families now, we can certainly do that. I think the approach has been, I think, even for parents who are frustrated and don't have information, they would rather wait for concrete information. That's not to say with surveying and all that, but before we produce a plan, to give bad information is more problematic than giving, early is not good in this case. because of, you know, if it's got all those qualifiers and disclaimers on the bottom, it's, I said this to someone else today, that's basically a, you know, a compilation of thoughts. So.
Paul Goldner?
I mean, basically, I'm just going to agree with what Brian just said. Right now, 36 states, cases going up, and, you know, Dr. Fauci and Dr. Birx both saying we've lost control of this thing. We can plan for whatever we've planned for and make all of these plans, but the reality is that the only one of the three that we can say, this is what we're definitely doing and we're riding it for the whole year, is the fully remote option, unless we're prepared to just say, we're going to do the fully in person and people are going to die. Those are our two. If we're going to say this is what we're doing, those are the two choices. Otherwise, we don't have a plan until we know what the situation is 2 weeks before school starts.
I feel like I saw someone else's hand.
No, not thinking.
Okay.
Anybody else? Caitlin?
I think I agree with both Paul's, but then to also say, parents seem to have the understanding that they will have a choice.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of parents have come forward and said, oh, well, we're just going to choose XYZ based on their, so my only caution would be not to maybe, well, not to put anything concrete out, except to say the Department of Education has said this is not a choice. They are going to go in these steps and our hands are bound to that. Whether or not we agree with it is a totally separate issue, because I'm hearing a lot of, well, I'll just keep my kids home and do the hybrid model. And I'm thinking that's not going to work out for you.
Yeah.
Because right now you don't have that choice.
I agree. And I think that the Lexington, their plan, given people the opportunity to make that choice, just complicates it even more, because I had teachers who thought that was what we're going to do. And I'm like, no, that's not. So there's certainly a lot of different information flying around. Paul, I want to just let you know that as far as professional development, we will have a plan. We actually pretty much know what we want to do and the teachers who are going to teach it, but the teachers have asked specifically that we not offer it in July, because for the most part, especially if it's around technology, they go to the trainings, they get all excited, and then it lays dormant, the information, and then they kind of go back. So they said for them, the time frame, and I would say it was like 98%, did not want anything in July or even after school. They wanted it starting in August. So we certainly have a plan, because I think as the reality is, if we are going remote, for me, it's about really bulking up what our teachers can do with technology to keep kids engaged. And that is kind of on the forefront of my thinking, because I know that's going to be in person. I know that's going to be hybrid. And I know that that's a constant, at least with all of those different models. So that is absolutely a priority. And the teachers are willing to come forward in August and participate in that, because they saw their struggles and don't want to have to deal with those struggles again. And they want to be on their game when September starts.
And Caitlin, to your point, when I messaged last Thursday? Time blurs, but last Thursday, right ahead of the press conference that the governor did with the commissioner, I promised an update by the end of this week. So I will be absolutely messaging again district-wide tomorrow. Started crafting that, trying to give people an update without promising anything. So I agree with you, and I think that's the clear message needs to be, look, hopefully you've read the guidance. Here it is again attached here in case anyone hasn't seen it. But there is no a la carte menu here. You know, if parents have a choice, they do, right? There are parents who have discussed homeschooling. That is a legitimate option that they have, but that means parents are getting a curriculum and becoming the teachers. That's a very different thing than opting for what they believe is the remote or hybrid model. So yes, we'll make that clear absolutely tomorrow.
Did I see Linda? Did you have your hand up? Linda is frozen, I think.
She's frozen. Oop, but she unmuted herself.
No, I did not have a question.
Okay, thank you. Kaylee?
This kind of deviates from the topic right now, but I know it had been brought up that extracurriculars, clubs, things like that I just wanted to put it on the table that I have been hearing a lot of the theater kids like exactly, they've been saying that they're going to have a real issue with the school as a community if we allow the sports teams to continue, but not the theater, because it's one of those things. I just wanted to put that out there, that that is a concern that's growing.
Yep. I've heard the same. I will say that, Kaylee. And there are distinguishing characteristics about what is and isn't allowed. And one thing has been made abundantly clear, and I think Paul the first, you mentioned this, was, the one thing that has been unequivocally a directive is anything that is medical related and safety related is guidance not coming from DESE or the governor. It's directly from the director of public health and the Department of Public Health. So right now, our fields are technically open. We as a district are not running any programs, but people can come and use the fields. Town leagues are slowly but surely, no competition, it's very restricted. But things that happen outdoors versus things that happen indoors have very different requirements. But that is absolutely something, Kaylee, that I'm aware of, and certainly working on. No easy resolution right there.
Thank you.
Narissa, you're muted.
I'm
Oh, nope, no, you're not. There you are.
weird.
Yeah.
Okay. I was calling on Paul Goldner, sorry.
I actually wanted to cycle back to something Brian said right near the beginning of the meeting, which was that it sounds like we're going to come up with 3 plans and we're going to say, well, we can do this one, but if we say that we can't do the fully in person, some team from DESE is going to come in and say, yes, we agree, or no, we disagree with you, and then we're going to have to go with one model or the other. So it sounds to me like which plan we start the year with is not entirely up to us. It's going to largely be up to DESE. But if we get to mid-October and numbers are changing around, do we know yet who's going to be making the call for which model we're in? Is that going to be up to us as a district, or is DESE going to provide some metrics that we go by? Or is that going to have to come from the state again to switch to a less or a more restrictive model?
I think movement between kind of phase 1, or I don't want to call it a phase, that's old language, but kind of step 1, bringing everyone back with restrictions, and the hybrid model, I think movement between those 2 models will be a local decision, because it still means people, depending on the numbers, teachers and students coming into, I'm sorry, my hands get large when I get by the camera, put them down. So because by and large, kids and teachers are coming into the schools, moving to the remote model is only because the building has been closed. So I think that would be something that's coming from the state. Certainly we could make the local decision, again, back on March 13th. I made the decision as a superintendent in concert with our kind of North Shore Roundtable superintendents. We made the decision on Friday. It was then decided Sunday night by the governor, and then as of Tuesday, I think that was the 17th, officially the state was closed. So certainly the closing of buildings yielding a fully remote model absolutely would be the one thing that the state ultimately controls and says we can't be in the buildings, right? That's currently DPH guidance and DPH directive is the buildings are closed. Not anymore, but I mean, so through the end of the year. So that would be the one that the state would absolutely have control over, but that doesn't mean that, I made the comment earlier about that team. What kind of team is it? I guess the second question would be, what kind of teeth does that have, right? So I've always, I guess the question is, you don't mind getting slapped on the wrist if it's an opinion. Someone says you shouldn't have done that. If they're going to threaten to take away Chapter 70 money, okay, now we're listening. So I guess, we as a group, you as a committee, having input, and if we're going to buck the system and we're going to say that's great, Commonwealth of Massachusetts or Commissioner of Education, we as a committee, I as the superintendent with the support of the committee, we believe this is right for the district. I'm all good with fighting the system if we know the clear downside and the clear ramifications of the decisions we make. That's not yet clear. But I will have no problem getting in trouble if the getting in trouble is a good old finger wagging.
Other questions or comments? All right, seeing none. I guess I have some comments and then I have some questions. So when I received this guidance and started going through it, one of the first things that I did as I started seeing things kind of, in some cases, not match the guidelines that were being used for other parts of the economy and other types of organizations, is I went back and I looked at the science, because to me, you should figure out where you're at and then make your plan from there. And I wanted to know what they were basing kind of the rationale on. I have, I guess, really 4 big concerns with the science that they included in there. One of them is that they have a number of questionable sources that are used in the document. They have sources that are not peer reviewed, which is, even at the high school level, something that you don't do. You just don't base research off, or papers off of research that hasn't been reviewed, because it's not considered reliable. They have a number of small studies and case studies that are really statistically too small to be useful. And then one of the other things that I found is that on a number of their studies, schools were actually closed during the study period. So 2 of the big places where I found that used over and over again is there's a study that says out of this meta-analysis of different clusters, that only 8 out of 201 clusters were actually based in schools. But when you go back and look at the data behind that, that's largely China and Singapore, and Singapore's schools were closed for the entire time of the study, and China's schools were closed for about 3/4 of the time of the study. So I don't know how, when you're measuring schools against, and how frequently that's occurring against things like worker dormitories that were open the entire time, religious events which were open almost the entire time, the whole time in China, almost the entire time in Singapore, against things like cruise ships, which were a big thing in the beginning, but then kind of tended not to be, but that was more a function, I think, of economics than of actual banning in a lot of cases. Prisons was on the list above schools. These are things that do not close, whereas the schools closed. Another example that the one that's commonly cited on transmission from students is this one that's in Switzerland, and they went and studied 40 pediatric cases in a specific hospital, and it was over a 1-month period, and for all but 3 days of that month, the Swiss schools were closed. So there may be some instances there where, there was a student that did contract COVID from a school, but compared to any other spot where you're going to contract it, there's a relatively small chance of that. So I don't know how you can, when those students, that particular study says that that adults are far more likely to transmit than students. Students didn't have the capability to pick it up and transmit it into their households. They were at home. It was the adults that were going out. And I really struggle with using that type of a science as a basis for this type of a document. I think it's been mentioned a couple of times, and I'm going to use an example that actually another school committee member said to me at one point, but the staff section of the document has almost the exact same page space as hand washing does. So it's all about students. It's not about staff. We have several hundred staff members in our district, and I believe we need to be as concerned about them as we are about our students. And then the last big thing was was that and it said in a number of different places that that children seem to be under tested when they're doing testing. So they're always comparing cases, but you don't know where the cases are unless you do widespread testing or a representative demographic testing. And I went up to the CDC site to look at what the testing numbers look like, because the Mass DPH doesn't publish that as part of their numbers. And when I went and looked at the commercial and the DPH testing results that were up on the CDC website, 18 and under were approximately 5% of the total number of tests that have been run. And they're 22% of the US population. So while in some instances, if you have a positive adult, you're going to run multiple tests on that adult, and that's going to inflate that testing number for adults, I don't believe that it's representative of either the rate at which children are contracting or potentially transmitting COVID as well. So I have some major concerns about the science, and I'm hoping that there's going to be an option for Brian or Kim or whoever has a voice in this to push back and get some answers on that, because it really bothers me if it was a situation where they came to the conclusion that they wanted to open schools full time, and then they went back and tried to find the science to back it up, which is definitely what it seems like they tried to do. I want the guidance to follow the science, not the science to follow the guidance. I want to recognize that I think to a large degree, parents need this. This is definitely something I've heard from parents, is I need my kids to go back. It's our responsibility to make sure that that's as safe as possible, that they're going back in, but there is a real need there. And I want to recognize that, because it's real. We just need to make sure that staff and students are safe in whatever plan comes about. And, you know, those are all going to be variables that we look at going forward. That said, I have a couple of questions. I think most of these are for Kim. One of them is, has there been any talk? So one of the concerns that I've heard commonly from parents is, if students are back in school full time and they're wearing masks, that this is going to be a significant barrier for students as far as building a rapport, which especially in the young grades is so very important, and being able to pick up language cues and things like that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Has there been any discussion along that line? What could be done either with social emotional learning on like alternate cues to pick up, or alternate ways to sort of build that relationship?
Yes, they actually are very concerned about that, with the physical cues, especially not knowing their teacher. For the kids who've never been in a school before ever, to come to school to see teachers in masks and so forth. So they have talked about that. That is in the forefront of their thinking, that for all of the kids, this is going to be really challenging for those students in which they educate and they support. So it is on their radar. They actually are absolutely coming up with some different ideas about how to address those needs. We've also talked about implementing a time where it's like a I don't want to say it's a class meeting, because we can't do the round circle, but a lot of social and emotional development, just even around the masks. They're talking about sending videos to their kids of them with the masks on and without the masks, and then how are some other cues that we can use, like sign language, if they can't read the face of whether you're smiling or sad or something like that, you know, so that there's other gestures that they can potentially use to communicate with those students during these times. But yeah, they are really struggling, I would say, the K through 2, especially, with just trying to switch over to this even in person, and then also that remote piece, because so much of their experience is personal.
All right, thank you. What about substitutes? Are you going to include them in your surveys? I know, just anecdotally, a number of our substitutes are retired teachers, which puts them even past the age of some of our existing, you know, teachers.
Yes, that is absolutely, that's been a concern of mine that's been a concern of mine even without the COVID is our access to subs. And many of them have already stated that just in passing, I wouldn't come in and sub with the risks that are there. I was thinking though, there are a lot of college students who are in their last year that are around that might be especially if they're in the education field. So I was thinking of contacting a few of the nearby colleges to find out kind of on a listserv if we could potentially get some of those folks in who it is their specialty and they are at a lower risk. So.
Okay, thank you. That's an interesting idea. I like that one. Hadn't thought of that one myself.
What about I'm sorry, Narissa, before you go, what about polling alumni that are in education right now that are finishing up school? Because that would even be somebody that's in the district and closer.
Yeah, that's gone to the district, you mean, Erin?
That could potentially be finishing their semester at home with their parents, that you're looking for substitutes, maybe even polling some of the past students that went into education.
Yeah, absolutely. I think right out of high school, I would be hesitant. That's still very young. I would hope maybe juniors or seniors in college would be a better age to target. But absolutely, we can certainly, I like the idea of kind of starting with our own community to find out who would be available.
Sorry, I'll continue to open it up for questions if anyone else has anything along those two lines before I just kind of bust on through. Go ahead, Kaylee.
So this is if we can't share teachers just between like two different cohorts or classes, how can we have substitutes when they change their class day to day?
So I was thinking at the elementary, middle school, it's a little bit easier. But as far as the substitute, do you mean like the substitutes rotating or the students rotating?
Well, I'm just saying that it was mentioned that you can only have that like one teacher with that one group of students for the whole time. If substitutes, like they're there for a day, but they'll be in a different classroom the next day or the next week. So contact tracing wise, how's that going to work?
Yeah, I think you'd have to probably great point. You'd probably have to put them on a rotation schedule so that they're not coming in the same time, or at least giving a couple days in between.
But we would have to, there's no perfect science to your point, Gailey. Like there's no way to minimize it. The key is minimizing the, as much as possible, keeping students together. Again, at the high school, completely impossible. But at the elementary level, even the benefit of keeping the same students together with the same adult. Day over day, some people were talking about that, keeping them for weeks at a time. Everyone goes home to a house at night, right? Every student goes home to a house. Every teacher goes home to a house. So it'd be the same thing with a sub. So there's no good science there. Yeah.
Any other questions on that, or let's go back to the social emotional as well. All right, seeing none. I want to concentrate for a minute on the remote option, because having gone through a lot of those science studies and looked at some of those schools, I realized how quickly they either opened and closed or opened part of the Singapore, for instance, basically welcomed back what are essentially, my understanding is like equivalent to our juniors and seniors first, and they were intending to stagger the rest of the grades. And then as numbers started to climb, they actually held off on the rest of the grades and didn't bring them back and sort of kept them remote. I would guess that at some point in the coming year, we're going to have a situation where we're going to be all remote. I don't think that's, I think that's far from the question, I'll just say. So can you just talk about remote a little? I know there was mention of potentially a common statewide platform, kind of where your conversations have gone to on remote in the working group, Kim. I think anything along that line would be helpful, because to me, I think that's something that was definitely, it was ramping up as we left the spring, but wasn't there for sure. So I want to make sure that that's something that whenever we have to go back there, that it is solid. You or Brian just talk about remote and what's already been looked at and what questions are left open kind of in your minds.
So we, as a working group, we started, right now we're focusing on bringing kids back in person and addressing some of the questions that you're talking about today. But in that discussion, we're looking at having a common platform for everybody. So as a parent, you wouldn't have to go to the Stay Connected page and then link to Google Classroom and then hop over here to, I have no idea what other people were using, but it would be one place that you can link certain sites to, but that would be the one place or one hub for everybody to access all the information. In addition to that, we've talked about the schools that we found had the, I don't want to say the most success, but at least as not as much frustration, is that, again, we wanted to make sure the platforms that kids were using, it was something that they were already familiar with. And so, iReady seemed to be something that people were comfortable with and worked with, and it had an in-person lessons that you could potentially do too, which gives you a little bit of ability to move back and forth between those two environments. We talked about, what else did we talk about? The Math iReady piece, just because, again, it's a common platform. So really, we were looking at platforms that are already in play that we know have been somewhat successful, certainly need to work through some of the kinks and make sure everybody's up and able to use those to the extent that they are able to use those, because there are a lot of bells and whistles and options in those. And that's kind of, Paul, where that PD comes into play to say, okay, you use this part of this platform, it actually has this much to offer, and we need to get you up and moving. So, we're certainly looking at some common platforms. I was kind of jumping around in the breakout groups today, and the high school was just starting to have those different conversations of what it would look like remote for them. But it is absolutely on it's for discussion next week. So. And we're also looking into what other schools are doing too. I think, there are some of these schools, when, again, I go back to the Lexington, they started their planning session in May. So we've been 2 weeks into it with 1 week of guidance. So all of that to say, we are trying to get our hands on as many plans that we possibly can to see how they've addressed these issues, because they've had the same questions and they found a way forward. So we also want to learn from our neighbors, not just in state, but out of state as well, to find out how they're doing things and so forth. So I don't know, Ryan, do you want to, I'm sure.
I was going to say, just to distinguish between when we say platform, so there's a resource like an iReady or Go Math, that's an online educational resource that students and families have access to. And then there's a platform as an LMS, a learning management system like a Blackboard Connect, or the way we're using Google Classroom. So that's what we've said is, moving forward, there has to be a uniform place where parents know, this is where I'm looking for the posted assignments. This is where I'm looking for the week's schedule. This is where I'm looking to go into the class I might be linking out to iReady. I might be linking out to watch a video lesson. But that's been one piece that we've been very clear in saying that that's something for the management for families, when we're in a remote scenario, and certainly even if in the hybrid scenario, there has to be a universal platform. So if you've got a 3rd, 7th, and 10th grader, you as a parent know where to go for all that information, and the students know where to go for all that information. The second piece is there is a discussion at the state level about I don't know what we're going to call it, a self-paced remote learning resource. That would be something the state is looking to procure, and that we would then subscribe to on a per student license basis. So it would be an opportunity to say, okay, we're fully in, or we're hybrid. A parent can choose to say, I want a fully remote option. This would be the tool that we offer. The district would pay whatever that license fee is for that student to participate in that self-paced, again, asynchronous remote learning experience. Again, that places a lot on families, because it doesn't become something that our teachers would be pacing per se. But we use Fuel Education right now. If a student is out and needing to take a course, and we have folks who check in with the educators, but there's actually an online instructor. So something along those lines. No clear definitive answer yet, but The state is working on that, which would certainly be a great option because it gives us another tool in the toolbox as far as being able to say to a family, if they say, you know what, we can't do it. It's again, back to that decision where how much is it going to be placed on our hands to say, no, this isn't a choice. If you've got medical documentation, you don't have to. But if we have an option to be able to say, look, families, you can choose this as an option, and this qualifies as a year of instruction in 5th grade or 6th grade, whatever the grade level is, that'd be a great option to have. But there's nothing clear yet. That's an option being discussed. And it sounds like I would say there's movement on that.
Can you just talk about real quick if there is, kind of this one-stop shopping? Are there budgetary impacts to that? Is it something that we may already have in district and just need to adapt it?
So I would just say flat out, there would absolutely be budgetary impact. Yes, it would be a per student license, and if the state is procuring what I would assume would be a competitive rate, we as a district have access to iReady over the course of the entire summer at no cost to the district whatsoever. That would be significant dollars. My guess is there's still going to be educational companies that are willing to step up and probably not donate fully, but certainly, contract with the state at a very reasonable rate. But that would be borne by the district 100%. Yep.
And the system that Kim was talking about, I guess that was kind of what I was going back to.
Oh, the Google one? The Google platform?
Google or what it is, but whatever your one-stop shop is.
Yes, we already have Google as part of the Chrome licenses.
Okay, so this would be all based in Google rather
Yep.
than.
Yep.
So again, that's not a clear decision, but yes, if it was Google, completely zero cost whatsoever. If Google Classroom became the one-stop shop for all of the, the hub, then there would be zero cost to the district.
Okay. And I assume that if whatever direction we end up going here, there's going to be, because this was one of the things that came up repeatedly in the spring, there's going to be full student and parent video training.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, and for the students too. I mean, we talk about the staff, but parents need it. I know Carla Collins is working to do some videos just for her grandparent group so that people can access them, and we can have different levels of videos. It's not just where, we have to take people where they are and move them forward. So yeah, we absolutely, that's already in the making.
Okay, thank you. Paulise, did you have a question? You're muted.
So
there you go.
Hey, Brian.
You gotcha. Yep.
Brian and Kim. So my question is, as you look at remote learning platforms that are being done successfully by other districts, maybe like Lexington, do you hear anything about staff reduction or class joining in terms of numbers? So instead of teaching a math class to 20, they teach to 40 or they teach to 60. Is there any staff reductions that are possible if you go to a full Zoom remote learning process?
Yeah,
and I just throw it out there just to see, I mean, if there's discussion in districts that are doing that, what are they saying? Or is it still strictly class by class by class?
Yeah, I think it's Kim, feel free to jump in, but there are not, I haven't heard of any districts that are saying we can go fully remote and save staff dollars and have 50 students in a remote classroom. Is it possible? Absolutely. I know there was a question about, I was asked about, is there, if we ended up in a hybrid model and we had 17 students across the entire 5th grade from all 3 schools, would we be able to have one 5th grade teacher teaching remotely and have them teaching students from all 3 schools? Yes. Has that been set up? No. So, I mean, there really aren't a ton of restrictions in regards to what we could do. We have creativity, and it would just be a matter of the ultimate plan we end up with and where we land. But we absolutely have the ability to be creative. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That was somewhat done in my older son's grade in the spring.
but they needed all of the teachers and all of the IAs that were there for that grade for breakout sessions. So it would literally be like 20 to 30 minutes of direct instruction. And then another, it depended on what they were doing, but maybe another 10 minutes to a half an hour. But it was 4 or 5 students in a remote breakout room to make sure that they were fully grasping it. And they were using they were using all 3 teachers for the grade. And they were using, I think there were 2 IAs in that grade that they were also using in that scenario, because when they were literally taking, I don't know how many were showing up on a given basis, but there were 76 kids in that grade. So to break them down and any sort of a manageable group, you need a lot of people to be able to do that for a breakout session to make sure that the students are really getting it.
Yeah, I would say as a general rule, to do either hybrid or fully remote well, we need more educators rather than less, whether that's instructional assistants and regular educators and special educators. It's the more remote and complicated we get, the student teacher ratio is more and more important. Again, if we're talking about a lecture at the high school, that's a very different scenario than more intensive work at the elementary or middle school level.
And any other questions on remote, Kaylee?
I know I wasn't I had missed the last meeting, but have we figured out, since we did get approved budget-wise by the towns, how much we're going to be incurring in loss due to this, or is that still on the table?
Great question, Kaylee. This
It
was
is a good question.
both a September opening and a budget discussion at the same time. So I would say, so we owe a huge debt of gratitude for the 3 towns for approving our budget. That means we're not slipping into a 1/12. So we're not having to worry about our town assessments. So that is a good thing, but we still have very little clarity about what September will mean in regards to state funding. So I had mentioned this early on, that the commissioner uses the term level services plus as an assumption. I think that's perhaps a dangerous thing to assume, that we're going to get at least level services and more money. But I guess I'm taking that as a semi-positive sign that at least, hopefully, we're not going to lose $2 million like we were talking about 5, 6, 7 weeks ago. So we do have a budget with our towns. That's good. We as of today are still existing and still operating and paying our bills and paying our people that we're allowed to do by law because we have a budget. But we still do have that question about the state revenue. So the good thing is there's certainly momentum in that if there aren't many scenarios here where it costs less to do any of these 3 models well. So there at least seems to be some momentum saying that folks, there were many districts who were expecting more Chapter 78 through the Student Opportunity Act. At a minimum, hopefully we can assume at least we're not going to lose any money, which would be a great place to be. But there isn't any clear and definitive answers yet, Kaylee, now.
Okay, so to sum that up, are we still looking at the possibility of having to send out as many red slips as we were talking about in the past, or are we in the clear from that yet?
I would say, are we in the clear? No. I would say I'm feeling more optimistic now than I was before. And I would say, there are districts who did pink slip and lay off lots of teachers and are already in the process of potentially reversing that, with the thought that there is growing momentum that at a minimum, we've got to get schools not losing dollars as we go into this new day in September. So I would say it's not, are we completely out of the woods? No, but I don't want to talk for anyone else, but I'm feeling a little more, I was cautiously optimistic. Now I'm moving towards optimistic that we're at least not looking at the catastrophic losses that we were talking about a while back.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
And I'm guessing we won't know for a while. That's just my take on what I'm hearing at the state level, is that they're talking about waiting on both July 15th was the new tax filing deadline because they pushed that out. So they need to know approximately what the revenue situation looks like once they hit July 15th. So I'm guessing at the earliest, they're going to have those numbers like third week of July, maybe even the beginning of August, to be able to say, you know, with a good confidence where those will fall. And then the other thing that they've said they've been waiting on is some sort of a cash infusion from the federal government, which there does not appear to be any timeline on right now.
Or movement.
Or movement. Yep, it's true. Or movement. So at some point, I mean, my hope would be that they'll kind of hold out and wait off a while for that, and not, there's definitely some push to say, nope, let's just cut right now, and whatever we've got, and we're going to make our state budget off of that. My hope is that they'll hold out a bit longer, and that something would come through, rather than, you know, just saying whatever, third week of July is the day, and if we have revenue numbers but nothing's happened at this federal level, then we're just going to make a budget off of what we have, and that's going to be the way it is, because that's where it's going to get back to the catastrophic. That's where we're headed, straight back to catastrophic in that situation. So I will say, literally, I don't usually have email open in front of me, but I did get an email right actually after the meeting started, from a Globe reporter who was running a story on the resolution that we passed a couple of meetings ago, calling for full reimbursement of any COVID-related costs. And he did what looks like, I just skimmed it quick, a great job with that article. So it talks about how there are, I think, 113 different districts that have now signed on to that. He has quotes in there from both chairs of the education committee, from a number of different school committees. It's a really well done article. So I'm hoping that will carry some weight and get some publicity on that. When I talked to the reporter this afternoon, he's like, "This is the first I'm hearing about this." And I said, "Yeah, I think it's been kind of flying under the radar." So hopefully some publicity will do it well. So.
We should say too, there's, referenced in the guidance, it talks about different funding sources. So those, we expect that we're going to get more information in the coming 2 to 3 weeks. We should have a little more clarity on that up to $225. Do we get anything? Do we get 100 of that? Is it what that number is? If we got $225 per pupil, we're talking about close to $500,000. So that's a significant influx of cash. And then the discussions about, back to Maureen's question earlier about buying $40,000 worth of new desks and renting, $10,000 worth of storage containers to store all the tables outside while we're, all those possibilities take on a whole lot more reasonableness if there's money to be able to resolve those problems.
Any comments or questions before I go on? Because I have a few more on my list. All right. This is actually kind of segues into the last question, is with the idea that at some point we'll probably be going between different models. And I think this is a Kim question. With the working group, has there been any discussion on how those transitions can happen and how to make them as seamless as possible? If there's a situation where to start the school year we're sort of all in, and then at some point there's a change and it's either a shift to hybrid or a shift to all out, and then potentially even back again?
So I think, right, again, we're at our initial conversations about this, and we're just kind of sharing and problem solving and talking about different ideas, and again, learning from other districts that have done it and been very successful. Is not shutting off the remote piece of it, even when they're at school. So there could be certain times that they're going to be working on a platform or an instructional, what do you call it? What happens at night. I'm a morning person. Can we have these I do so much better in the morning.
We can
do
just
like an instructional resource.
I need a 504 plan just for me to concentrate. So when you're working on an online platform, that's not about a communication piece, or it's not a file system. It's really to teach that particular child in front of you. And I'm thinking K through 8, we're going to have those opportunities in person at school, right? So that's going to be part of this blended model that's going to allow them to shift to go entirely remote. So if they've already been experienced in person with the teacher and with other kids, when they have to make that transition, it'll be much smoother. So that's our goal, is to have that type of, we want to emulate what is happening at home, very similar to what they're going to be doing in the classroom with the teacher, and there's going to be more practice and guidance. So as in the past, we kind of just said, here's a Chromebook, good luck with it. That's not going to be the situation. Absolutely not.
Okay, thank you. And my last question goes completely in a different direction, and it's just about facilities. One of the things that's hit upon in the guidance is this concept of hand washing and, you know, using hand sanitizer and the different instances where you're going to be expected to do that, and that they're supposed to be washing their hands for 20 seconds at a go, not counting, rinsing, and drying. Can you just talk about, and I don't know who this question goes to, but about the facilities that we have to be able to handle something like that right now, and the feasibility of making that happen in a timely manner?
Yeah. I mean, I think we're going to be relying a whole lot more on hand sanitizer than on hand washing, just because of the access, the ease of access to a sink and soap and paper towels. So we certainly, you can't use sanitizer all the time, right? It's not the same thing, but even the guidance that talks about, you know you have enough sanitizer on your hands if you rub for 20 seconds and then it's dry. If it dries after 5 seconds, that's the equivalent of, not to name any particular kids, mind, who wash their hands for 3 seconds and it's done. And, we know it's 20 seconds and lathering it to scrub away the germs. So, we were just talking about hand sanitizer today, and, we're not talking about just the ones you see every once in a while in the school with the nice dispenser on the wall. We're talking about the gallon jugs everywhere you go, that anyone, if you have a moment, if you have an opportunity to walk by it, sanitize. So we will be going through gallons and gallons and gallons and gallons of hand sanitizer. But I think it will be, that's not to say we won't do hand washing, but we just don't have the resources, or the facilities, I should say. We'll make sure we have soap and paper towels and, sinks that are working, but just with the number of students versus the number of sinks, there isn't the right ratio to say that we're having hands washed every hour on the hour.
Okay.
We will have lots of hand sanitizer.
All right, great. All right, that was my last question. Does anyone else on the committee have any other questions or comments? I apologize for my beagle snoring.
What?
Kaylee, go ahead.
Wait, what did you just apologize for?
My beagle snoring.
Sorry.
In case you're hearing noises.
I was Zooming with the teacher, and she had a pet pig, and the pig was snorting, and I so wanted to say, who snort? Like, she admitted, I have a pet pig that snorted. I'm like, okay, just try to.
Yeah.
So a beagle snoring is okay.
Couldn't even hear it.
Yeah.
He's very relaxed. He's enjoying the meeting. What can I say? Go ahead, Kaylee.
Well, this one's less of a normal question, but I know you had said earlier that we've been having trouble getting hand sanitizer for the school. Have we thought about possibly finding it, like, more local people who are making their own home batches or something in that range? I'm not sure, but
yeah, I think good question. So homemade masks is different than homemade hand sanitizers, right? So we have to be using hand sanitizer that's, is it 60% ethanol or 70% isopropanol? So it's very strict guidelines that, again, this is the piece that's very restrictive, saying if from a medical perspective, we have to be providing this. So I'd be hesitant to have homebrew hand sanitizer, but there has been lots of discussion about people who are willing to sew masks, right? So we'll be providing, I think the count that I saw on a spreadsheet with Kyle today was 60,000 masks just to get us going. And those are the paper, we'll call them surgical masks. So those are great, but it might be more comfortable for kids or staff to have a cloth mask that's more fitted to their face. And certainly, I know there's some efforts to begin that process. But I think hand sanitizer would be tough just based on the medical requirements. Can you see Maureen?
Any other questions?
Maureen's literally
Maureen?
waving.
Hi, Maureen.
Sorry, couldn't get myself off mute. No, I just wanted to ask, when are we meeting again? Because I know our next meeting is TBD.
Yes. When I talked to Brian today, the recommendation was to meet in another week because things are changing so quickly right now. I don't know if anybody has any objections to that, but that would be our recommendation.
Okay,
No,
literal
seeing
thumbs
no
up from
objection.
Paul II and Paul III.
And that's July 8th, right? Just to confirm.
Yeah, so it'd be Wednesday, July 8th at 7 p.m.
So I don't know if we wanted to, if you had any intention of talking about budget separately, but the one thing I do want to note tonight, so on that list that we provided last week, you know, there were some obvious things that a retiring IA that we don't need to replace, and the medical premium insurance where we're going to save $210,000. We still have the 2 6th grade teachers and the 2nd grade teacher that I'm at this point not recommending we do any reinstating, but we talked about the halftime custodians last week. And as of last Wednesday, we had no clue what we were looking at. I think at this point, there's at least a strong chance that we're bringing people back into the building. So I don't remember exactly who it was that brought that up, but that was a need before COVID and before pandemic. So I would certainly suggest at this point, unless anyone disagrees, that we actually move forward. We were talking about delaying those hires, but actually move forward with those 3 elementary halftime custodial hires, because we're going to need to do more, not less, in regards to sanitization and cleaning.
Yeah, we don't need
I'm just asking, so you're taking that off of the delayed spending list? Is that what you're saying, Brian?
That's what I'm suggesting is, right, so we were at 626 in potential savings, that and there was 57,957 to make, to save those 3 halftime positions, because it's just adding another halftime, there's no new benefits. So that would bring the, you know, the on the table savings down to 568, just under 569,000. So unless anyone protests.
Yes. Yeah, no, I don't think there are any concerns about that I'm seeing from the committee. I'm seeing lots of nods and some thumbs up.
And again, it takes time. We're going to advertise, and there's a period there for posting and interviewing, and so it's not going to be tomorrow where we're ready to hire someone. It's going to be a few weeks. So we certainly have opportunity, but I think we need to move forward with that, because like I said, we're going to need more, not less. And also, just to confirm, and I don't know if we confirm this, we've been talking about the magic, what's the term, Kyle? The electrostatic misters that we've been talking about for 3 months while we've been waiting for them, and they've been kept getting confiscated by more important people. So we have those, and I believe as of this week we have the juice, the solution that is the EPA approved and environmentally safe solution. So we're in the process of rolling those out. All of our offices, I mentioned last week, all of our offices are operating on a limited staff. People are rotating through. So every night offices are being disinfected and decontaminated. So just so that you're aware, those devices are now in use.
Excellent, thank you. Actually, that brings up one more question, if you don't mind. As part of the facilities check, is HVAC going to be part of that, and air circulation? Because I know that's been a big thing in a lot of, kind of the overall studies that I've seen, is that discussion about how air gets circulated.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so our facilities director, I believe he's already scheduled that for the summer. That's something that we do every single year.
Okay. All right. So that's going to look specifically at kind of like the COVID situation.
Yeah. So I should clarify. So the functionality of our existing systems are checked every year, and then part of the working group that we have that will certainly, and I'll put it right in my notes right now to make sure that that's discussed as well, in terms of making sure that we're in a good spot given this guidance.
All right, thank you, Kyle.
So the really only thing we can do for COVID, right, is change filters, and then systems can be set. I know when we had the town meeting, some of you were at the Rowley and then the Newbury town meeting, and so you felt how cool and refreshing that changed air was when you were in the auditorium. But that was set, right? So we were expelling existing air and sucking in fresh, hot, humid air. So it didn't feel very good, but the systems can be set so that they're actually exchanging the air rather than keeping it in. So certainly those are basic settings that don't cost money. We could certainly put in this discussion about HEPA filtration and air purifiers. So again, if we had hundreds of thousands of dollars sitting in a queue waiting to be spent, we could certainly be talking about that. But I don't believe we're going to be in a situation to be putting air purifiers in classrooms at this point.
Okay. All right, last chance. Anyone have any last minute questions?
Can I ask a last minute question?
Ooh, sure, Brian. Go ahead.
So at the end of every working group, I was talking with Kim yesterday, and so developing literally like a 3-question survey, 4-question survey to dipstick that group of 50 some odd people to say, okay, as of today, where are you? Because I think that's important data that we can say as of 2 weeks ago, they were here. Now as a group, collectively, they're here. Parents have moved here, teachers have moved here. So I'm interested to just ask the question for anyone willing to kind of share an opinion to say, are we at a point? I think I've stated, I'm very happy to buck requirements of the Department of Ed, depending on how much of a requirement they really are and what the blowback will be. So I would just love to know, I'm certainly getting the sense that people are I would say not exactly loving the information contained in this document. But I would love to just hear, like, specifically, what would people's preference be? So if right now we had to make a call, would people say, I want to, preferences, knowing we have one of 3 options, work the bring everyone back, work the hybrid, or work the remote? We have to work all 3 regardless, but we'd just be interested to see where people are as of today.
Go ahead, Maureen.
Well, I would say as of today, I am in the camp of work to try to get the students back. And I would also add that the majority of parents that I've spoken with recently feel like that's what they would like to see as well.
Paul Goldner?
I think that if we have people in the buildings, people are going to get sick, people are going to die. I don't think this guidance, like you said, I think it started from a place we're going back and then found the science to back it up. I think that's absolutely what the guidance did. I'm very unhappy.
Anybody else want to volunteer? Tina?
I'll say that my opinion has actually changed from the start of this meeting, because to echo what Maureen just said as a parent, and based on, and I have to admit, I have purposely not been watching the news or staying up to date on certain things for my own mental health and what I need to focus on for my family and work. But in a lot of I trust the administration and the educators. So to hear someone like Paul, who's an educator, and someone like Narissa, who I trust in terms of reviewing that document fully and talking about the difference between the science and what the science is based off and peer reviewed, and the fact that the studies are based on the fact that like most of the kids weren't in school. So to say that they can't make people sick, like I honestly hadn't even thought of that. And so not understanding that made me feel comfortable with the thought of sending my kids back to school. As much as I selfishly want my kids to go back to school, so they are not my problem from the hours of 8 to 3, now I don't know that it's the right thing to do. Hearing those different perspectives, as much as I am a awful homeschooled, I mean, we're very fortunate. My kids will be fine. It's going to suck for me, but for the greater good, that's the sacrifice I'm going to have to make. So I think it's tough either way. And I do think you guys are doing the right thing by polling people and having the working group, and based on the lack of guidance that Desi has given, not, and knowing that things will change, not say, well, this is what we're going to do, just do it to make people feel better, because that's what people want right now. They just want you to make them feel better, but that's not the right thing to do, just to throw something out there. But I trust you guys. But yeah, my gut, much as I hate to say it, I think virtual is probably the safest way to go, unfortunately.
We've got, thanks, Tina. We've got Paul Lees, and then Paul Mayette, and then Linda, and then Caitlin and Kaylee.
So I would favor today in person, but I recognize what Paul Goldner says and what Narissa's research did, that this study may not be as well supported as the state says it is. I could move quickly into a hybrid or a remote, but I have to know that the district has a solid plan. I have no problem with going to remote because safety is far more important. But right now, I am not convinced that this district has a plan in place for remote that's solid. And I base that on what we had at the end of the school year. So if the district can get there, I can go there. You know, I'm all in favor of keeping people safe, but I want to insist that we get a good plan in place if we go remote or hybrid.
I would just respond to say, you're absolutely correct. We do not have a full plan in place yet. That's you. It's not a belief, that's a fact, but absolutely there will be one by early August. Yeah.
All right. Paul Mayette, to finish out the triad of Pauls, you're up next.
If I thought that we could go back and stay back, I might feel differently. I have no faith that that's going to happen. I'm looking at the numbers around the country. I just don't see that that's going to be realistic. So I think I would, you know, if we had to say something right now, feel more comfortable saying we're going to put our energy into remote so that it doesn't look like it did in the spring. I think remote can be better when educators are given 2 months instead of 2 days. So I think that's, I want to see that done well. So I wish we had the ability to just say, yes, we can put our energy there into that.
Linda? Can't hear you, Linda.
Oh boy.
Oh, there you are.
I just had this conversation with my family because we, I haven't seen my in-laws and stuff like that. So they were asking whether, because we usually have a July 4th breakfast, but my in-laws are home, my kids are home, my brother-in-law works from home, my sister-in-law works from home, but me and my husband, we go to work every day. I said, with the uptick in what's happening in the country, I said, I wouldn't want to see my in-laws in person because I'm around people all day long. Now, to bring all these kids and staff back to school, you're going to have that same exact thing. All you need is 1 or 2 kids or 1 or 2 staff members to contract this COVID, and it's going to be a big problem that you're going to have at school. I personally think it should be virtual, at least for a few months at the beginning part of the school year. To say that we can go back to school in September, as Narissa has said with the science, we don't know what effect all these kids being together is going to have an effect on. So that's just my opinion. I mean, we've had some people at work who have contacted the COVID, and it was a nightmare at work trying to contact trace all these people that may have been in contact with someone. I just have a problem with bringing everybody back and having this safety issue come about. That's just my opinion.
I forget whether it was Caitlin or Kaylee, but Caitlin was next. All right.
I think safety-wise, we're not there yet, and that's just fact. And I don't know who I was talking about it with, but they were like, well, it's either 52% or 32% in this packet. And I was like, well, 32% is what you're considering safe. That's not safe. Statistically, that 32% is then going to go on. And in fact, in another study, has the same infection rate as the flu, but instead of everyone gifting it, it's super spreaders, and you just don't know who those are. Above and beyond that, as a parent and as a teacher, for social, emotional well-being, consists to be key. And we cannot consistently tell parents that their children will be in school full-time. We're going to give them a weekend and then pull them out and upset entire families. And then right now, the only thing we consistently can say is if you stay home, you're safe. So I'm kind of the mindset that you should keep children home until you can keep them and their families, teachers and their families safe consistently for a long period of time, and not just keep undoing it because, oops, there was an uptick, oops, there was something here, take everyone out. It's not good for the kids. It's not good for the teachers. It's not good for the families because planning wise, they'd be a mess. It just doesn't seem like a great idea to send them back full force in the fall without any type of consistency.
Just clarifying, so to go back to Brian's question, are you considering full remote, or are you talking about hybrid, since he was asking for one of three?
I would say full remote unless something huge changes, because that's the only consistent way to provide learning and let kids start and get into it and families plan. If you could keep hybrid and keep kids safe, I would be down. But right now, I don't see anything backing that up, because sending them to school just puts them at risk.
Kaylee, you were next.
I definitely understand all of the viewpoints that have been thrown around. I agree that we need to keep as many people as safe as possible. But I can also say that there are going to be a lot of students that when we're finally able to go back in full, we're not going to be able to adjust back the way that everyone thinks that we're going to be able to adjust. Because I can tell you, high school point of view, everyone has thrown off their sleep schedules, and instead of getting up at 6 in the morning to start working on school stuff, we would get up a little bit later and we'd be working later into the day. So there's going to be that problem when we come back into brick and mortar, as well as daily interactions between one another. So personally, I think I would prefer a hybrid model in the beginning if we could safely do it, but I would like to be able to see the science backing it up.
Fair. Who have I missed? I feel like there's at least
Aaron.
It's you and me left from the committee, I think, Narissa.
All right, you're up, Erin.
If I had to decide today, given what's going on in my family, it's not safe for us to send our kids not knowing what's going to happen, because the risks to my family are too high to send the kids back and worry about whether or not they're going to bring something home to dad. So I would have to say full remote along those lines, being, knowing full well that it's not the popular thing right now for what I'm hearing out on social media, as well as interactions with other parents, that a lot of people are fed up with. We're fed up at the end of the year with the remote learning and their frustrations with it. So again, I want to echo what other committee members have said along the lines of making sure that there's a strong program in place and it's thought out, and that we're working together across all of the school systems to leverage each other as resources, as well as pooling together the collective knowledge to come up with some new good and creative ideas to keep kids and families engaged and make the lift on the parents at home a little bit lighter. I think would stand to go a long way to be able to reinforce a decision if we have to make a decision to go full remote, to be able to sell the program better to the families that are really interested in just going back to school full time.
All right, fair. I can say I am honestly still split. I believe that there is significant damage that's being done, especially to our special education students, with not having in-person instruction, which from what I'm hearing from parents, a lot of them need that. The remote simply doesn't work for those students at all. There's not even a chance for them to succeed and be able to even hold where they're at without getting, explicit in-person instructions and supports for them. I also hear that there are, our parents that they're at the situation of, going back to work and being able to feed their families or not. Even with unemployment, it's just not enough in some cases to be able to support a family. And I'm very concerned about that as well. I think I have focused, I have to admit, all my research, other than, just day-to-day reading, on what was wrong with the DESE, the DESE science, not where the right is. I would love to see a hybrid remote model. I think, like, in my brain, that if the science is there to say that you could do that successfully, I would love to see that be the first step, because I think that if you can bring back the kids that really need to be there, and as part of this, don't kill me, Brian and Kim, give families who want an opportunity to be full remote to go full remote and just say, yep, you want to be full remote. We're not even going to have to worry about having those kids in the classroom and dealing with social distancing and masks and everything else for those kids. So let's let them be full remote in that hybrid schedule, find a way to accommodate that. I think if the science was there, that would be my ultimate preference. I don't know that the science is there because, again, there's been so much going on lately, and just the work to go through all the studies that were referenced in Appendix A in that document was probably about 8 to 10 hours for me. I didn't have the opportunity to go the other direction. And say, if it was one of the things that's in there, is they're basing the 3-foot distance on this SARS, MERS, COVID combination survey. And when you take out SARS and MERS, COVID definitely looks like the studies specifically for COVID look like they fit for a farther distance. I don't know if you get to that point, if we had the science to say, yep, if it was 6 feet, because that's a farther distance and that's where we're at, or 8 feet, or whatever it happens to be, could you take a sub-study of students that really need to be there? And yes, I get FAPE. That really need to be there and make sure that they're there in the classrooms and they are safe. That's kind of my ideal universe at this point. And I know that's not the answer you were looking for, Brian, and I'm sorry.
No, I can say I appreciate you all for entertaining the question. I was literally looking for a quick response, just a dipsticking of kind of where folks are at, just as I'll ask the same question again next week, right? Because I think it's helpful, to your point, Dina, that people's minds get changed as conversations happen. So thankfully, you're not making a decision tonight, right? We're not making a decision next week. And so it's just a process. So I don't think there's anything wrong with what anyone said. And even to your point, Narissa, about, apologizing to Kim and I agree with you unequivocally. The question will not be whether or not we want to pull it off. It's, do we have the resources to pull it off? So if we have the resources to pull it off, we put the Cadillac in place and meet the needs of every one of our 2,400 students across the board, right where they need to be. It becomes a financial challenge, a resource challenge. So I appreciate you all engaging in the question. You certainly gave. I didn't mean to put everyone on the spot. It was just literally just trying to get a sense. But I appreciate everyone's honesty and clarity. That was helpful context.
Brian, sorry, Norris, I just wanted to ask Brian quickly, are you willing to share what some of the dipsticking results that you've taken in these meetings has been with educators?
Which meeting? This meeting?
So you asked us if, what we wanted or what we saw right now, and you said you've been asking this question in meetings. with other.
The working group, yes. So
Yes.
they're literally, after today's meeting was the first time the survey went out. So yes, we can absolutely survey or share that data. Yes. I don't know if Kim's talking and she's muted.
Sorry, I keep looking at it just because the conversation that we had mirrored the same concerns here. And as we got into it, I think it was Tina, that as we started to unpack this more and more, people's viewpoint of what they had come to the meeting thinking had changed. And so I just checked the survey. So we have half the people who have responded. We're 50-50. We are 50. We are split right down the line. So.
And I think that's going to be the case, right? There's always going to be that context in this, always, but particularly in a situation like this, context matters, right?
Yeah.
So my situation in my job with a 14 and an 18-year-old child versus someone else in their job with younger children versus someone else who a different age and no children, context absolutely matters. So there will be no right answer for everyone in this scenario. The question is, what do we do that produces the most positive impact for the most students possible and minimizes the health risks, and also minimizes, to the point, Dr. Lloyd or Lloyd Fisher, Dr. Fisher, right? That's his name, I'm getting his name wrong. The points being made about the negative impacts of students not being in school that Kaylee mentioned, those are huge factors to consider. That we know for a fact lots of students are struggling, and they will absolutely be better when we get them back into the general population and in school and socializing with their peers again. Absolutely. I know some of you are seeing it with your own kids, right? So this is not an isolated thing. This impacts everyone. Okay. The only unmuted one here.
Sorry, that was my bad. Kaylee's gonna have the last word.
Nice.
So I was just wondering if I could add a little bit of context to some of the answers from the survey that you may have gotten from the students. I know from my personal perspective, I put it more negatively as a student than I would have if the remote learning had been more concrete. For us, they had, on the high school level at least, they had told us, I understand that it was flexible and that things were changing because we're in a global pandemic and things are constantly changing. But once they had told us that we were going remote and that it would be graded, they had originally told the high school that the last week of school would be used to make up work that you hadn't done during the quarter. And then less than a month before the end, it was swapped to, if you're at risk of failing, you're taking a final and everything needs to be turned in by then. Or that's how it felt for a lot of the people I was talking to. And if it had been, because I know a lot of people are planning on, I'm going to do as much as I can do in the week, but I'm not going to stress too much about it because I have this extra chunk of time. And that being changed so quickly to the end negated a lot of it for some people.
A perfectly valid frustration and concern voiced, Kaylee. And I think those are the things that we have no option but to be better at, right? So if we have, when we come back, theoretically, according to the calendar you approved back pre-COVID, the calendar approved starts school 9 weeks from today. So walking in the door 9 weeks, it will be almost 6 months from the time where we went out remotely. So 6 months after this started, we have no option but to be good at whatever model we have in place. So if that's in the classroom or that's hybrid or that's remote, there's no option on the table where we're not doing it really well. And so I know that's certainly the commitment of the working group, is to identify that and make sure that those type of frustrations aren't felt, where we're not changing things on a weekly basis, because that's not fair. That doesn't promote effective learning if that's what we're doing.
I agree.
All right. Can I get a motion to adjourn, please?
Make a motion to adjourn.
I'll second.
You're always there for me, Paul Lees. Thank you.
Paul the first.
Paul the first. I need a roll call vote, please. Erin?
Yes.
Paul Goldner?
Yes.
Maureen?
Yes.
Caitlin?
Yes.
Paul Lees?
Yes.
Linda?
Yes.
Paul Mayette?
Yes.
Ina?
Yes.
And I'm a yes as well. So thank you all for your time tonight, for sticking through it. And thank you to Brian and Kim and Kyle for all your information, and for Dave for coming, even though he didn't get to speak at all. Thanks, Dave. And we'll see you all next Wednesday at 7 p.m. here on Zoom.
And just to confirm, we're posting the same agenda, single topic, September opening and budget implications, right?
Sounds like a plan to me.
That will be posted tomorrow.
Yes. All right. Wonderful.
Have a good evening, everyone.
Thanks, everybody. Have a good
Take care.
night.
Have a
Bye-bye.
great evening. Take care.